Hey guys, what's up? Take on the World Secret Show. We are so blessed to be with you guys tonight. Thanks for tuning in. We got a super special guest tonight. Um, we can't wait to get to that, but I'm going to cover a little bit of in-house stuff really quickly. We are 57 days away from Take on the World 19, and we're super excited. We just launched a brand new way that you can get involved to help us, which is supporting our kids program. And we have these really cool vinyl decals, if you guys can see that. We've got, this one's the sky blue, this one's the galaxy. These are vinyl. This is the glow in the dark version. You probably can't see that too well. But they are fantastic. They can go on just about anything. You just don't want to throw these in the dishwasher or anything like that, but they're hand washed. You put them on as bumper stickers. So absolutely fantastic. They're $5.50, and that includes shipping. So go over to takeontheworld19.com, and you can go to fundraisers, and we have that right there. So if you can't make it to Take on the World 19, but you still want to support us, that's a great way to do it. Pick up one, pick up two. All the funds go right to our kids program. So super excited for that. So without further ado, we've got Robbie Davidson in the house. If you guys see the description, it's already there, so you already know. Robbie, thanks so much for being with us tonight.
Thanks so much for having me on, Chris. It's a real pleasure.
Oh, you bet. We've been trying to do this for like, I don't know, 3 weeks or something.
Yeah, it's a while. Like I said, I was traveling in New Zealand and then heading to the other conference and just keeping really busy, but definitely want to get this show on the road for sure. So it's great that we're able to finally connect. We've been able to talk, on the phone, but we haven't been able to find a good time to do the show. So I'm glad that we're able to do it.
Yeah, you've had a pretty crazy schedule, but yeah, it was everything looked pretty awesome this year, from Question Everything to New Zealand to the conference in Calgary. So yeah, you've been crazy busy and working on a bunch of stuff, which we're going to get into. So, but if you guys know anything about the secret shows, if you're brand new and you're watching this for the first time, this is a show where we just are really just hanging out, getting to know one another a little bit better. And for you guys to, me and Robbie, we know each other real well, but for guys, we don't get to really share like some of our passions and what we do in life outside of, what you see on YouTube and celebrate truth and all these things. So tonight, that's what you're going to get. You're going to get Robbie uncut, his story from the beginning, how he got to where he is today. So we're going to talk a little bit about everything in between and some of our shared passions that we've had throughout the years. And it's going to be a really fun show. So Robbie, I always start off each show with this opportunity to let people know, your basis, where you come from, and share that salvation experience. Where were you before, you became a believer? Have you always been a believer? What's your story? Because we know Robbie is this guy who shares flat earth videos, puts on the biggest flat earth conference. He's in all sorts of documentaries, good and bad ones. So yeah, why don't you tell us a little bit about how you got to where you're at, especially during your walk with Christ?
Yeah, for me, I mean, growing up, I thought, into my high school years, I thought the Bible was ridiculous. I used to take great pleasure in making fun of Christians. I thought it was ridiculous that someone could follow a book of fairy tales. So, I came from it, and I wouldn't say I was an atheist. I would say that deep down inside, I was still an agnostic in the sense that I really didn't know, but I definitely knew that the Bible couldn't be trusted. It had been changed over time. It was a bunch of men that, wrote it. These were the type of things that were passed down to me. You'd hear this and you would kind of parrot these things to people saying, how could you trust this Bible? So I used to, find great pleasure in kind of teasing and harassing Christians, to tell you the truth. So it wasn't until the age of 21. And the story for me is quite miraculous, because it wasn't like I got to a point where I decided to change my life and choose God. It was like God intervened in my life and said, I have a plan for you. And, this is the time to submit and surrender your life to me. I had met a friend, and the friend was a little bit different in the sense that, I'd be clubbing it and out at the bars, and this is the age of 21. And I would tell him, he would come with his car, and I say, come on in to the bar, and he would never come in. And I never really registered, but anyways, I'd hop in his car afterwards and we'd go cruising around, there was a couple streets here in Edmonton that you'd kind of cruise around looking for girls and, whatever. And we just, be talking and stuff. And it wasn't until a few months later that one night he was dropping me off late at night at my house. And he said, we started talking and he said, it's getting really late. He goes, I got to go. I got church in the morning. And I said to him, I said, your parents make you go to church? And he's like, no. He goes, I want to go to church. And I'm like, what? What do you mean you want to go to church? Because for me, it was like the only reason that a person would go to church is if it was, something that your parents forced upon you. But nobody that was cool and hip and, whatever would ever want to go to church. So it really kind of struck me in the wrong way. And I was like, what do you mean? We ended up talking and one thing led to the next. And we started getting into eschatology, which I found very fascinating because he was starting to correlate, world events that were happening in correlation with what's happening in the Bible. And I found it fascinating. I found prophecy, all these things really fascinating. And a lot of these things that he was telling me, I had never really heard before. And that was fascinating. And I remember at one point in the conversation, I said to him, it's okay. It doesn't matter. I believe in a God, like higher power, and he told me, he said, that's not enough. And he told me the difference between merely believing and trusting and surrendering your life and following God. So that was a pretty pivotal discussion. And you would think that, from that point on, because almost like the light bulb went off that night. Monday, I went off. I was clubbing it again. Tuesday, I was out doing the thing, and again, I was pretty wild. I was into sex, drugs, rock and roll. I was into drugs and I was living a pretty wild lifestyle. My circles of influence were very wild, to say the least. And it was like nothing registered. It was a Wednesday. I was sleeping on my parents' couch in the basement. And it was about, I don't know, 4 a.m. or so. And I woke up and there's this presence around me. And I remember putting my hands up and said, I'm coming to you. That's all I remember. And I can't really describe what I saw, but it was something so powerful. And it almost kind of just propped my hands up and I said, I'm coming to you. In the morning, I woke up and I was sitting there. I was kind of groggy and I was waking up and I'm sitting there on the couch and I looked and my parents have like a shelf of all these VHS tapes. And they had almost 100, at least. And there was one that was pulsating. It was glowing. And I couldn't see what it was, but I got up and I walked towards the bookshelf and it was the movie Jesus. And it was actually the 1979 version of Jesus, if you're familiar with all the Jesus films. I grabbed it, I put it in the VCR, and I sat and watched it. And that was the first time that everything just came alive. It was like, Jesus was literally speaking to me in that video. At the end of the video, I got on my knees and I literally surrendered my life at that point. I said, no more doing things my way. I said, I want to do things your way. I say, I surrender my life. It is yours. I give you full control. It is now, my life is in your hands. Do what you want. And it was an absolute complete surrender because I'm like, I gave ultimate permission to say, I don't care. Do what you want with my life. I was at that point where I'm just like, I was fed up with a lot of things. And I said, lead me to the right people, the right friends, the right path to go. And from that point on, it was a radical change. Many people noticed how radical it was for me. Everything stopped. From that point on, everything that I was doing stopped, and my friends really couldn't understand it. And while this took place, I was very passionate. But what was interesting is, even though I believed I had surrendered my life, I was bombarded with doubt. It was like there was whispers in my ear constantly, like, how do you know for sure? What about Islam? Maybe Islam. How do you know that Christianity? How do you know the Bible's true? And it was almost like this whispering going on. And I struggled with this for the whole year. Even though I surrendered my life and I believed what I believed, belief was not good enough. I needed to know that it was the truth. So I went on this journey, into apologetics and really learning everything. And I studied all the world religions. I studied all the cults. I studied all the, information I could, getting into creation science. And again, this leads kind of into our story, but really I wanted to know everything. And I was blown away at the amount of evidence there was to support the fact that the Bible could be trusted historically. You could look at it archaeologically. You could look at it within the Hittite Empire, for example, that people laughed at for years and years and said, there's no such thing. We've never found this Hittite people. And then I believe in 1948, around the time the Dead Sea Scrolls were found, they found the whole Hittite ruins. They found the entire, civilization and relics. So this was something that, people had laughed about. And what I realized, that people had come against the Bible and laughed at it. And yet time and time again, it was being proven to be truth. And I remember begging. I was on my knees praying. I'm saying, God, take this doubt away from me. I couldn't understand. But I realized it wasn't me doubting. It was Satan trying to put these doubts into my mind. And had I take them captive, I don't know what direction it would have gone, but I was rebuking it. I was kind of staying on that path. But it was almost like God was saying, I want you to fight for me. It wasn't going to be easy, but he also was equipping me, for the tasks he had in the future. From that point on, though, things got really great as far as being confident in my faith. I didn't wrestle with spiritual attacks. Before I got saved, interesting story was, I had a reoccurring dream my whole life. And I found out later on that my sister had the exact same dream. And it was a very interesting dream. There was this mountain, and I'd be climbing this mountain. And as I got closer to the top of this mountain, there'd be these whispering kind of demonic voices, and they wouldn't turn up in volume. They would turn up in intensity, if that makes any sense. So it wasn't like there was a volume dial. It was the intensity. Well, I would have this reoccurring dream as a child, and I never really understood it. I just thought, no big deal. It's a nightmare, whatever, but it was reoccurring. Well, what happened was closer to the time that I got saved, this dream, these voices took place when I was awake. So not only was I hearing these voices when I was sleeping, now I'm hearing these voices when I was awake. And I remember kind of struggling with the fact that I'm like, man, I'm going to have to go into an insane asylum. I think I'm going crazy. But I did notice that when I did get saved, these voices never came back. The only voices I heard were doubt and going, and sometimes I would get thoughts that were so blasphemous and so disgusting that my mind couldn't even think of them, if that makes any sense. It was almost like Satan went too far, where I was like, aha, I caught you, because that's so sick and twisted. I couldn't even think of that because that's not even on my radar. But from that point on, I got very involved. I went off to Bible college at Trinity Western University. There was a college there called Northwest Baptist College as well on the campus. And I just went in deep. I wanted to learn everything. I didn't know what direction. At one point, I thought maybe I would go into youth ministry. But from that point on, I got into various forms of ministry. I got into youth ministry. I got into prison ministry, street evangelism. Part of a big thing for me was apologetics. And I was passionate. I mean, you didn't know me for more than 5 minutes, and I was sharing my faith with everyone. And that's kind of the way I've been. My continual, anyone that knows me back, from high school into my 20s into my 30s knows that I've always been very passionate. And creation science was a big part of that, because you'd run into people all the time. They'd be like, evolution, science, biology. This would be the one way they start hitting the Bible and saying, you can't trust the Bible, because the Bible's clearly wrong, because we know through evolution. So yeah, that was definitely a big part of the journey. And for me, coming to the whole flat Earth thing, that was early 2015. And I remember, my story. I came across a video, and I have a video on my channel, on my YouTube channel, Celebrate Truth. It's called "You Won't Believe How I Came to Flat Earth." But I actually came across a video of an atheist making fun of the Bible, kind of things that I used to do. But what this atheist did, he had some sort of talent in making cartoons, and he put a cartoon together showing the firmament underwater. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, wait a minute, but that's what the Bible says. And if I'm a 6-day literal creationist, and I believe that I was taking the Bible literal, especially when it came to creation, I'm like, what do I do with these verses? Because to tell you the truth, all throughout my time in my Christian walk, I don't think I ever stopped and said, what's this firmament? I just went over it like the canopy theory or whatever. I didn't really give it any attention, because I'm like, oh, okay, whatever. It wasn't important. I was more important in other verses. But I realized afterwards that, wait a minute, when this atheist started bringing out the literal interpretation of Genesis, I was like, wait a minute, why does the Bible say this? So because it had flat earth in the title, and this video, by the way, was dated 2007. And I have this documented. You can still find the video. The link is in the description on my video on Celebrate Truth. And from there, I typed in flat earth, because I'm like, what in the world is going on? What is this flat earth? Because even when I watched the video, it didn't have anything to do with flat earth. It just showed this dome underwater and, a bunch of stuff happening. I still didn't register this flat earth thing, because from my mind, flat earth was, ships going over the edge, ridiculous pancakes in space. So when I saw this illustration, it didn't register as flat earth. But I'm like, what's this flat earth? And I typed it in. And the second video I came across was Mark Sargent's Flat Earth Clues. And from that point on, that was it. I mean, because as a conspiratorial type person, a truth seeker, I was always, I'd already looked into the lies of the world when it came to, Illuminati, or when it came to the Federal Reserve, the money system, 9/11, all these things. I was all up on those things. And for me, the biggest conspiracy for me was the moon landing. That was one thing that even in conspiratorial circles, people would laugh at me. I never believed in the moon landing, or at a certain point, I pivoted out of that. And we'll go into how I met my wife, because that's an interesting story. The moon landing comes back into it. But It is interesting, however, that that was there, but I never really understood the reason. You know, it was almost like, well, to end the Cold War. You know, they did this. You know, but I never thought that's a pretty big deception for such a small little thing as convincing the Russians not to go to war because they're going to be scared off. It didn't really register. But really, that's the nuts and bolts of it all. That I came across flat Earth. I went on this absolute binge. I could not stop, and I watched and watched and watched. And 2 weeks later, I'm like, oh dear, I've got to tell my wife. I think the Bible says the Earth is flat. I mean, how do you bring this up with your wife, right? Because you're just kind of going through it, and she was pregnant at the time, and she knew something kind of what's going on, but I wasn't alluding. I'm just like, I'm glued. I'm glued. She sees me all the time, glued on this thing. And when I brought it up to her, Chris, she said, if the Bible says it, then it's true. And I said, no, 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 sweetie. I just said, I think the Bible says the Earth is flat, that we're in a dome. She's like, if the Bible says it, then it's true. So, I mean, she humbled me in a sense of like, God bless her for the amount of conviction she has on taking the word of God, you know, just for what it says that quickly, where it took me all this time to struggle and it took her 3 seconds. So it was always an amazing thing. And from that point on, she's been an incredible support, launching Celebrate Truth on YouTube, August of, so it was about April, May of 2015 when I came across this information. It wasn't until August of 2015 when I put out the Celebrate Truth channel. And she has been nonstop support. She's been supportive, not just of the channel and my ministry, but also the documentaries. I mean, she's narrates and she plays part in my documentaries. Also, she's a huge integral part in bringing the Flat Earth International Conferences, the first one in Raleigh, North Carolina in 2017. I couldn't do it without her, but it's been an amazing journey so far.
That's awesome. You know, what were you into right before? Because I was reading something before we were talking, and you had told me, maybe you correct me if I'm wrong, that you were looking into doing some things with the Nephilim before you even came into Flat Earth, that you were going to do some teaching on that online.
No, I mean, I'd already looked into Nephilim years ago. I forget what video I saw where the end there's that I forget his name, but he's an older man, and he kind of like it was a UFO video, it was an old Christian video, and at the end of the video, this guy's basically breaks it all out, and he says, "Could it be that Genesis 6, you know, the sons of God and the Nephilim?" I don't know what video it is. I'm sure you probably know or you've seen it, but it's basically a Christian video on UFOs, and at the end. I'd already was convinced in the Genesis 6 thing, even before I knew who Rob Skiba or any of this research was. That really wasn't something that propelled me. I found it fascinating, but if I was going to speak on anything, it was more going to be standing up for what was going on in the world. I was upset at a lot of stuff that was happening. You know, with whether it was abortion or LGBT, or so where I was kind of more animated and outspoken was all these issues that I was seeing, like how the world is just kind of slowly coming down on Christians and basically taking away their liberties and their rights. So for me, it was more, if I was going to speak on it, I was always known for someone that would get into more controversial issues. And that would be, you know, speaking on, you know, 9/11 and, you know, Federal Reserve was a big thing for me. Looking into the truth of what the money is in our, you know, in our world, fiat systems, understanding the importance of precious metals. If anything, I was bigger into precious metals for a long time before I came across even doing my YouTube channel. You know, I'd be on YouTube, I'd look at other YouTubers. So I was inspired by a lot of YouTubers, but they take different flavors. You know, people that were into precious metals, even cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin. You know, before I was even doing what I'm doing now, you know, I was organizing massive promotions and events around Bitcoin awareness, teaching people what the heck is this thing called Bitcoin or cryptocurrency. And this is back in 2013, 2014. Most people are like, it was just starting to get on the radar, and people are like, what is this? How does it work? You know, and what I found fascinating, whether you love it or hate it, the fact of the matter is cryptocurrency represented the first time ever in history that the people now can choose what money they want to use. It's never happened in the history of the world. We now have the choice. You can say no to the US dollars and say, I want to use this crypto. The governments, the banks hate it and they can't do anything about it. So for me, it was always about liberating people. It was always about looking at systems that could get outside of the matrix. And for me, you know, before this, I was most passionate about the financial matrix and how to escape that. Because when you understand the Federal Reserve, the central banks, how it's all put together, it's one big illusion. And, you know, it's going to have massive consequences in the future when this bubble bursts.
Yeah. Well, hey, we're doing the secret show on Take on the World TV. So we kind of address some taboo stuff. So I'm going to let you clear the record. So when you talk about crypto, there was, there are some things out there. There are people that are your naysayers, your haters out there,
Sure.
and they make, they're always asking, at least early on, and maybe you can set the record straight again.
Sure.
There was a car giveaway,
Sure.
and everybody's saying that no car was given away, and it was all a big scam. Set the record straight. Let people know.
Sure, absolutely. John LeBon was one of the biggest ones back when I first started. And my biggest thing when I first came on the scene with the conference was Robbie Davidson's a scam artist. He's going to steal everyone's money, and no conference is going to happen. Well, I can already say going into the fourth conference I put on, I'm a man of my word. Basically, these conferences happen. So this whole idea that I'm a scam artist, I'm going to steal everyone's money. I mean, there's not much credibility to it anymore because, I've already done multiple conferences. But number two, when it came to the Bitcoin tour, anybody could do a search on it, find John LeBon's article where he did an hour and a half interview with me. I reached out to him and said, "You have every right to know these questions. Let's address it." We got on the phone. He interviewed me. He said that basically I answered way more than he even wanted. He mentions in the article there were certain things that I said that it doesn't even need to be said because it's personal in nature, and he chose not to put it in because it had no relevance to the discussion, family stuff. But the reality is, the competition, if anyone has an idea, if you go to Facebook and you go to the cryptos page, you can follow the entire tour, pictures of every city where the car was. I did a leg with my father. I did a leg with a friend. There were 2 other legs that were done without me because I was working my full-time job at the time. And it was either the car or $10,000 in Bitcoin. Well, if you actually go to the Facebook page, you will see the winner talk and how much we transferred. I just looked at it the other day. I was sending it to Rob Skiba and a bunch of other people just because it's surprising that the amount of at that time it was $10,000 that we transferred to the winner because him and his wife chose that because they didn't have a honeymoon. So they wanted to take a honeymoon. Well, he goes on to say in this updated video that he put out, that he put together, because I said, "Hey, I'm getting a lot of flack. Do you mind kind of doing this? I have nothing to hide." He said, "Sure." What he did though is they basically cashed out. They kept 3 Bitcoin and they cashed out the rest. But at the time that it was transferred, it was like 24 point something Bitcoin. Well, I was saying it to a bunch of people. Isn't it crazy to think that in today's cash, it's over $250,000 that was transferred if you take, today's. But at the time you had the choice. It was either the car or $10,000 in Bitcoin. He chose the $10,000 in Bitcoin, not 10,000 Bitcoin. 10,000 US dollars in Bitcoin. That was the final prize. We did the final city in Las Vegas on Halloween. If you go to the Facebook page, you can follow the entire tour, every city, pictures with me and my father, the entire thing. If you still think I'm a liar, you know what? There's no help for you. And honestly, there's nothing else to say. I have nothing else to say on it because, again, this has all been addressed. And the biggest thing was I was a scam artist. And if that were the case, this stuff would surface. I mean, that was a North American tour with hundreds of thousands of people that were privy and that were part of that tour. Conferences we did, I spoke at different things. We had the car at different locations. People would speak up if I scammed everyone and I never did what I said. It would be rampant because you cannot do something like that without multiple reports. So again, it's all documented. We did what we did. Contact the winner if you want to locate him or whatever. But if you don't believe me, that's fine. You might not believe that I'm putting on a conference in Dallas, but you'll see that too.
Yeah. So we don't need to spend much time on this. There are so many people, especially within this community, that are looking for dirt on anyone just to call them a shill, just to call them a CIA agent,
Sure.
whatever the case may be, right?
Sure.
So we can't let that affect, we've got a bigger mission. We've got a bigger, plan in regards of sharing this, especially with celebration.
People do have a right, though. People do have a right to know the truth on it. But that's why I've never shied away from it, because I'm like, you should know. I would be curious. If someone did a thing, I'd be like, hey, who won it? How did it all end? Because, it was a 50-city tour all across North America. It was the first time anything had ever been done like that. I'm very proud of it. So I'm not going to shy away with it. I'll help people to do another tour like that. They're now starting to do certain things like that in Flat Earth. They're not giving away a prize at the end, but they're doing awareness tours on Flat Earth in the UK. All throughout Europe. They're planning one for the States. I think it's fantastic. It takes a lot of coordination. My wife helped out a lot as far as other people, coordinating that, because when you're coordinating a 50-city awareness tour, we weren't selling anything, though. We had sponsors on the tour. All we were doing is we're educating people and saying, hey, this is what Bitcoin is. It's interesting. It's cool. Here's some pamphlets. But it was all about awareness. But I do believe, Chris, people have the right to know. because again, it was a public promotion. And I stand by it, and dig enough, you're going to find lots of articles on it. We were at many cities. We hit almost every major city in Canada and the US. You'll be surprised if you actually see the lineup.
Yeah. Well, that was when you go big, you go big.
I
You
do.
just,
I do.
with conference
I
with
do.
that. So I'm going to take us back,
Sure.
To what one of our passions is. And this is what I found so extremely fascinating. The first time that we did a show where we were just getting to know one another outside of talking flat earth, biblical cosmology, biblical stuff, we found we had a very similar passion. And, I can let you share a little bit about that story, but it leads to so much that we're going to fill in some gaps that most people, probably nobody watching, probably has a clue about that you've done. And so, let's go ahead and jump right into that, because, that's we still love talking about it to this day. So.
And so, which are we talking about? Because there's lots of different things that you and I talk about.
Oh, well, sure. Well, let's take it back.
Sure.
All right. Well, I'll set it up, because maybe I set it up a little poorly for you. So, when you were becoming serious with your faith,
yes.
Music was an important part of your life, and you had switched all your music from listening to secular music over to Christian music. You used it as a ministry tool,
Yes.
handing them out in all of those ministries you talked about, whether it be the prison ministry.
I used to have death metal in my car. If someone jumped in my car and they were into death metal, I'd put it in. I didn't like death metal, but I used it as a ministering tool. And I remember people in my car, they'd be like, "This is awesome, man. Who is this?" I'm like, "This is Christian." What? They were just blown away because they're thinking of choirs. So the reactions I would get with putting in like these type of genres where people were blown away, because you'd get them all hooked. They'd be like, "Man, this is good, man." It'd be hip hop, or it'd be like thrash metal. So yeah, I mean, I didn't like country, but I knew people that did like country. So I'd use it as a witnessing tool. But it's just funny how music really bridged that gap. You could get people already going, "Man, these guys are really good." Because music has a lot of respect. If someone likes a band, they want to know more. They're curious, So I did, hey, borrow this, check this out, see what you think,
Yeah.
So yeah, I spent a lot of money. I spent a lot of money.
You still collect music. I still collect music.
Yes.
And obviously this was a big part of, things that helped us in our journey, in this faith journey. And you were sharing with me, so many times, and you mentioned it on other things, that you've been involved in Christian radio.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe we can spend a little bit of time talking about that. But you ran the largest Christian website on the internet for years, and most people don't even know that. So yeah, I would love to spend some time talking about that, and if you want to pull up some screenshots, and we can talk a little bit about that as well.
I don't have my computer. If you have your computer, you want to pull them up, you can. But
my mouse is not even allowing me to mute, so I can't even get over to that screen share. It's acting really funny.
It's all good. So it's all good. Yeah, I mean, I'll go back a little further, but yeah, for me, it was like I was called into like Christian media. So my first kind of job when it came into Christian media was a Christian publication called Living Light News, and it was a Christian newspaper. And I dealt with like sales and marketing, and that's kind of where God's had me pretty much my entire journey. But He's always had me on the Christian side of things, right? So in that, it was really cool because I made a lot of different connections with churches and ministries and businesses. And in that time, I started doing music reviews for the newspaper. So, at the time, the music companies would send you all this music. And maybe I'll go back a bit further. But when I became Christian, I had no idea the world that was opened up to me when my friend took me to the Christian bookstore the first time. And I'm seeing all these like this music, and I'm like, because I was into hip hop and dance music, and I had lived a few places in Canada, like Ottawa, the capital, and I was into some pretty wild stuff. I was into the clubs, so I was into some different genres. Never in a million years would I think that Christian music would have these genres. But I remember when all of a sudden he took me the first time to the Christian bookstore, it was like a kid in a candy store. I was like, I was spending like all my checks on it because I was blown away, because music to me was a big part of my life. And here was something that not only could I learn I could be ministered to, and it was something I enjoyed. So at the very beginnings, music became very integral as far as my walk. And for whatever reason, God called me to drop all secular music. And I've gone on the record saying, that's a controversial topic. Should Christians listen to secular music? But for me, it was maybe a gateway, but God was like, no, like that was it. And that was it. All secular music stopped. All I would do is listen to Christian music at that time. And it was amazing to me that there was so much to choose from. It wasn't like I had 4 CDs. It was like there was a ton, and they were coming out weekly. Well, I started doing reviews at the paper, and I started working there. And then at the time, as I was getting so into music, I said to myself, the web was very early on at this time, and I was self-taught. I taught myself HTML overnight. I was kind of just trying to learn it because I wanted to build a website. And all of a sudden, I'm like, man, I should build like a music site. I forget the site at the time I saw it. And I'm like, that'd be cool to sell Christian music. I was thinking, maybe I'll open up a Christian store, music store at some point. But I'm like, online's where to go. Let's start there. So I actually started with eternalsounds.com. And that was the first website. Didn't last very long. It quickly merged to a Canadian kind of thing. But in that time, I transferred out of that job and I created praise.com. It started off as christiancanada.com. It was going to be a website for Canada, all things, events, colleges in Canada, like everything Christian, right? Because I had built up a lot of contacts through the newspaper that I had advertisers, I had colleges that wanted to advertise and all that. They loved the idea. The web was very new at this time. But anyways, the vision got bigger than that. It said, no, this is for the world. And it came to me to do praise.com, and that's with a Z. Um, when I grew that, and again, you can go to the Wayback Machine. If anyone's listening to this, they're kind of curious, go to the waybackmachine.com, and you can see it all throughout the years when I started it. And I've got a lot of pages. I showed Chris the other night, and I think at its peak, there was over 250,000, I think 250,000 pages over. We had everything. If you think of Yahoo, because Yahoo was really big at one point. I know it's not very big anymore, but at one point, Yahoo was the bomb. It was big. It was like, MySpace and then, Facebook. Well, Yahoo was big. It was huge. So I kind of was following everything that Yahoo did. If Yahoo had an instant messenger, I built the very first Christian instant messenger. It was called Praise IM, Praise Instant Messenger. It had clubs, it had forums, it had chat rooms, it had Bible studies, it had, you name it, email. Email was a big component of it, where people were getting their email every day. I had a pretty good email system there. But another component of it was also a dating site. And I know some people are very hesitant with that. There's the good and the bad with everything. I can let you know that, yes, there's some dangerous things online, but there's a lot of amazing things. And I would say now in 2019, I don't know what the stats are, but I would say it's at least, 2 and 5 are meeting online. It's really, really bridging the gap. So I've always been a big favor of that, because I've definitely seen, the marriages and the people that it's brought together. But so it had everything, Christian, single, anything it could have. It had like Bible studies, tips. We went through it that night. Oh yeah, music reviews. It had movie reviews, book reviews. So in that time, I mean,
Music player.
yeah,
You had a music
yeah.
player
I
in there as
created
well?
I created a 12 genre radio player so that you could switch to any genre, and it was all Christian. So you could be like, oh, I want to listen to country Christian music. I want to listen to heavy metal, or I want to listen to hip hop or top 40. But yeah, I literally created that out of scratch, and it was pretty cool. And then I integrated it in the instant messenger, so people would be on the messenger and they'd be listening to music, at the same time. There'd be a pop out. And again, you can find all this on the Wayback Machine. The site eventually, got acquired. They didn't do anything with it. Then somebody else acquired it, and then it pretty much hasn't done anything. They got rid of pretty much everything on it, because they were advised that it was better to go this direction. But you can still find it. It's not doing much these days. But again, if you look at it, comparison on the waybackmachine.com to where it is today, you'll see that it basically went completely down the hill. But at its peak, it was doing very, very well. I had a staff of 6 people. And I was operating in Canada, and I had basically phone calls and people flying me into the States, like Crosswalk. Salem Communications is the largest company. I think they own about 143 Christian radio stations in the US. Salem Communications flew me, and one of my assistants out to Virginia to have a big meeting. And also we were flown to a couple other places because they couldn't figure out, what is this guy doing in Canada that we can't even keep up with him. Now, the reality was that I was very small. I could basically choose to do something. I could implement it, overnight if I wanted to do an all-nighter. These guys had boards, they had big board of directors. It took them a long time to implement. So again, it got on the radar. It was a really exciting time. I did that for about 10 years, 11 years. And after I did that, I kind of took a little bit of a pause. I started working at Touch Canada Broadcasting, which was a radio station, and I did that for 7 years. But near the tail end of that, which would be about 2015, is when I started kind of going online, and it got to a point when that I finally just resigned. I love my job, amazing. I still talk to everyone there. In ways I actually miss it. I was doing incredibly well there. I was the senior sales and advertising exec there. I was basically doing very well. And I left it and I went to my wife and I said, look, are we willing to take a massive reduction in pay? Are you cool with it? Are you willing to do it for at least 5 years to see what God has in store? Because I believe God is calling me out to do this, and there was nothing up to that point that I felt more critical to put my name out there and throw a channel than this whole enclosed cosmology thing. There had been things in the past, but I always knew, oh, it'd be nice to do a YouTube channel, but nothing propelled me. Nothing. It was almost like, this is your time. This is the time. So I went to my wife and I said, look, we're willing to give this a good solid 5 years. Yes, I mean, it's definitely not going to be anywhere close to what I was getting paid. And that's sometimes the saddest thing when you get accused of like, oh, you're in it for the money and all this kind of stuff. Listen, man, I left a very well-paying job to make a lot less doing what I'm doing now. But I did it because I'm called to do it. And also it's important, and truth is important. And it's been an amazing journey. All the things, the documentaries, the videos, and even, surprising enough, I'm called to put on the very first Flat Earth International Conference. That was a very big surprise to me, but here we are, going into the fourth conference, including Canada. And it's been an amazing journey just to see how this is growing to the point where all of a sudden, they're mentioning flat Earth is growing so massively that it registers on the front of Newsweek magazine. You know, to me, that's a pretty mind-blowing thing in the 5 short years for all to be on the front page of Newsweek magazine. And that was just in June 14th edition, I believe.
Mm-hmm. What's crazy is you shared that picture, and yesterday I was at what's it called, Barnes and Noble, and I got to go back. I'm gonna pick you up one because they're a little harder to get there, but this quote stuck out to me as I was reading the article, and it says, how many more, and this is right from that Newsweek article, it says, how many more years before the flat earthers are running for school board, asking physics teachers to teach the controversy, just as intelligent designers did not too many years back.
Yeah.
And that struck a chord with me because, as much as the church and creation ministries want to say what we are teaching is a conspiracy, it is, a farce, it's a joke. The world views everything that we teach biblically, whether it's creation, what we believe about the Messiah, and that not only did he die, but he rose again, biblical cosmology, you name it, up and down. They think all of it's absurd.
Yeah.
And when are we going to realize, we're all in the same team, on the same boat? If we believe in the scriptures, the world is mocking us.
Yeah.
And when you're believing what they're telling you, you should second guess yourself, because if you're out there and you're a biblical creationist and then somebody who teaches and believes in intelligent design and believes in the one true God, but you won't even give biblical cosmology just the idea that it could be potentially true, because not only does the word back it up, but the world hates it just as much as it hates what you're teaching.
Sure.
Shouldn't that speak volumes to you that, hey, they're doing the same thing, and the world is lumping them together. The world is saying creation, flat earth, you guys are in the same boat.
Yeah.
And it's time for creation ministries to realize that, because they hate you just as much as they hate us.
I know.
And we're on your team. Even though you don't think we are.
Yeah.
We're on the same team.
Yeah, they're not only lumping those two together, but they're lumping in, anti-vaxxers, climate change deniers, this big science denial as a big problem. But I've seen a lot of articles where they're correlating all these things together. It is, and I've done a few videos where I've said that they're going to get to a point where they're going to deem, these science deniers terrorists, and they're going to, do these type of things to really demonize someone that just seriously wants to question the world. And we're in 2019. You would think that we'd be in an open, free society in the sense that you could have different opinions, but it's troubling how bad the censorship is getting, and not just flat Earth. I mean, I put up a thing about you heard about the Australian rugby player Israel Folau, or I forget how you say his last name, but you heard about him losing his job over putting a Bible verse quoting the whole, these people will not have a place, in the lake of fire, that sort of thing. Um, but I don't know if you heard like what happened afterwards, but he had a GoFundMe. GoFundMe removed his ability. He was up to 650,000 to support his legal case, right? And everyone should deserve to at least be heard in court, innocent, before proven guilty, sort of thing, right? Like to have your day in court. Well, now GoFundMe is basically ripping away any Christian's chances of funding for a legal case when it comes to religious freedom. But what I'm seeing, honestly, the escalation, and I know that people talk about, oh, the end of the world and we're getting close and things are getting bad, but I'm blown away. And I'm a pretty optimistic, neutral guy for the most part. But I'll tell you, it is frightening what's coming. I mean, Pastor David Lynn in Canada being arrested in Toronto. I mean, I know Pastor David, and it was unbelievable to me that you have, the entire thing in its duration. I think it's about 40 minutes. You can see the entire live stream. They even tried, after they arrested him and threw him in jail, they tried to find hate in the speech and they couldn't. So they tried to get him on other stuff. But not only was it brutal what happened for him literally saying God loves you, right? Nothing about LGBTs, nothing, anything disparaging or even quoting any verses. And not only did he get assaulted, and the police arrived and he said, I want to press charges. I was assaulted. The police basically did nothing. They end up, the captain of the police is wearing a rainbow. It turned out that he was a homosexual police captain. You can definitely see the bias because literally he said, I have it on video. I was assaulted, which he was. You see it. They do nothing. They arrest him, throw him in jail. And, he's pleading all night to call his wife because she just had his, 3-month-old son or whatever. She's in another country. He was cold. They didn't give him a blanket. They didn't give him anything. He has it all on tape and he wants that tape released. But what I'm seeing right now is, and we're told this in the Bible, that the world will grow in its hatred towards Christians, towards the Bible, towards the truth. And we're seeing that. And for people that are, on the fence saying, yeah, I don't know about this Bible thing, a Christianity thing, look around. Who are the most hated people? You can see this time and time again with the media, with mainstream, with the governments, just nonstop. And when you start seeing like like Facebook and Twitter and GoFundMe and all these like tech giants starting to basically censor speech, anything that is biblical, anything that's truthful, anything that is even fair and just, for the sake of inclusion and for the sake of equality. Listen, it's not about equality. It never was. And I used to say this all the time. People are like, look, they just want the right to get married. And I said to them, it's never going to stop. It's never going to stop. And if you read the early writings of Hay, in the 70s, they will not be finished until they shut down churches that dare even speak anything against homosexuality. So for me, I always look at it like, it's a serious issue. No, we're not called to hate anyone. We have to do this in love. But I'm blown away at the levels of what we're seeing escalate even in the last 2 years. But I would say in 2019, it's ramping up something fierce. And YouTube, the platform we're on right now, I mean, there'll come a time when we'll remember the good old days being on YouTube, when we could say things like this. I mean, it's unbelievable that when you're saying nothing and you're talking even lovingly and you're just stating a point saying, I believe a position is wrong. That's okay. You believe it's right. I believe it's wrong. We don't have to hate each other. And that goes for Christians as well. We can agree to disagree. That don't fall into the world's mentality that you cannot say no or you cannot disagree with someone because that's hateful. It's not. Christians have actually even fallen into this trap where they're like scared to tell their brother, dude, I think you're wrong. It's okay though. We're still brothers, but I think you're wrong. People are scared to do that because I don't want to offend Chris. Chris might get upset with me if I say he's wrong. I mean, we're so scared these days, and all this stuff is seeping in. And when it comes to flat Earth, what I find remarkable is the fact that this is being highlighted in 2019 as the top thing. The headlines are saying YouTube cracks down on flat Earth, not UFOs, not Bigfoot videos, flat Earth. And when you do a search for flat Earth now, it's disgusting. I was talking to actually Rob Skiba just the other night, and I said, dude, I don't know if you know this, but if you even just type in flat Earth Rob Skiba, see what videos pop up, not your channel. Look what videos. All sorts of videos making fun of Rob. but like not Rob until you get into like, video 20. Well, most people click on the very first few results. That's the way it works. And Google knows that. I used to work in search engine optimization when I ran my web company for 10 years. And I can tell you one thing, very few people go to page 2, right? And there is truth behind that. Now, I don't know if you heard about Project Veritas that just released. Did you hear about the controversy on Project Veritas? That could be
Mhm.
a whole show, Chris. That is just mind
Yep.
blowing. Coming forward, that is scary what they're trying to do for the next election and what they're trying to do with conservative Christian ideology. And again, they're focusing specifically on that. So we might have all our differences, but I think it's time right now to kind of sometimes let's stand together, man. We need these numbers. I mean, we are going to lose. I mean, you can say, oh, prophetically, this is the way it's supposed to go. But God wants us to fight. God wants to stand up. All throughout the Bible, you see this. And we wage our war spiritually, not against flesh and blood. But honestly, let's do it. Let's band together because there's a massive war going on, not just with flat earth and hiding the creation and trying to hide the creator, but every single thing, including the created order. Simple things as male and female. That's under assault.
Mhm.
Understand that everything is God's order and it's under assault.
Yeah. Well, one of the speakers we have at Take on the World 19, I don't know if you're familiar with him or not. His name is David Arthur. Are you familiar with him?
I'm not, no.
Okay. Well, there's a little homework for you to do. He is the feature. He is the main story in Tom and Jared's From
That's right.
Through the Black.
I know who he is, yes.
Yes. So yes, the Fire and Brimstone. So if you guys do not know about the new documentary Fire and Brimstone, I will tell you, David Arthur. He was a former homosexual, transgender, for over 30 years, who was healed and transformed through the blood of Christ, and his story is so amazing, and he loves people. There's not an ounce of hate in this guy. He did a show here on Take on the World TV with Chad on Disputed Lands, and he gave a story in there where he did a live viewing of the Fire and Brimstone documentary at a church. And outside of the church across the street was the LGBTQ protesting, saying that this is all about hate. And he went over there and spent the whole time with them in the crowd. And at the end of it, they were actually sad to see him go. He went in there, stood on the word, but loved these men and women that were there. And so there's that fine balance. I think that's the one thing that he brings a lot of insight of creating that balance of how we're supposed to be in regards of this topic. Because you got two extremes. You've got believers who will just say, well, we're just supposed to love, so don't even think that's bad or that's wrong or they shouldn't be doing that. And then you've got the other people who don't love, who they are militant, and they're the Steven Andersons and they
Sure.
the
Sure.
Westboro Baptist Church, right? So you got that kind of group, but there is a true balance of walking in his ways and loving, and because loving is part of walking in his ways. And it's so interesting, so I'm excited for you to meet him, and I'm excited for everybody to come and hear David Arthur. If this is a topic you struggle with personally, he's a great one to reach out to and talk to about, or have a family member. He's just a very loving guy, and he's been through the ringers. His life is full of death, destruction, because of the lifestyle choices that he was leading from drugs and every other thing. So fantastic story of redemption. And when I went to go announce him for Take on the World 19 on Facebook, I knew his bio was extremely heavy, and I couldn't share the whole the bio online because I knew it was going to get blocked right away. So I went through this thing and I PC'd this whole thing up. I made it so PC that it was not even funny. And I went to go announce him. and within 5 seconds of it being posted, it was immediately blocked. I said, "Oh, that's interesting." I just went completely PC on this thing, made sure that I dotted all my, dotted all the I's, crossed all the T's, didn't offend anybody. Blocked. A few hours later, I delete the post. I don't even submit it. I redo it, and I make it extremely PC, down to the point that that he has a story of redemption. But I tagged him in it, so they were already watching everything that I was doing, and it got blocked again, and it kept getting blocked over and over and over. It didn't matter if I tagged him in there, because his page is on high profile alert. It was getting blocked. Finally, I just announced it, and I put it out there without tagging him, and got through the analytics very, very PC wise. And I was able to announce him like 2 weeks later. And then I was able to go back into the post and tag him in it. But I encourage everybody to check out David Arthur. He's known as the Alphabet Man on Facebook and live here on YouTube as well. So fantastic for that. Emily Pittsford is another one who speaks on this topic. I'm super excited for you guys all to be a part of Take on the World 19. We have the whole Through the Black, not all Through the Black. Jared won't be there, but Tom will be there, and he's bringing Jeremiah Dirt. Dirt is coming again, and if you guys didn't get to check him out, he's a hip-hop artist, been in the Christian hip-hop artist for many, many years. And what we're super excited, he's going to be doing a live Bible study. He did a show on Through the Black. He's going to be doing his live word-digging Bible study and a musical performance all in one set. So it's going to be pretty awesome. But Tom Dunn, if you guys aren't familiar with Tom, they talk on spiritual warfare, and they just bring these really heavy topics. Some of the things that you were talking about, Robbie, that you were passionate about before you got into biblical cosmology. That's what these guys do, Tom and Jared. But I'm so excited that Tom's daughter, who is on the front lines speaking out against the voices of the unborn, and because they don't have a voice, and she's out there speaking for them on the front lines. And so she'll be talking about her ministry, which is a pro-life ministry, and that's his daughter Evangeline Dunn. So takeontheworld19.com, where you can find more info on that. And something just, dust flew into my mouth. Sorry about that, guys. That's where you're supposed to pick me up, Robbie, and then you can fill in while I'm taking a drink. So
yeah, I don't know what I'd fill in with that, but yeah, I mean, we were talking before about music, and what I didn't mention, and I think you were wanting to talk a little bit about, is over the years, I amassed, a fairly large collection. And for a long time, I believed that, I had a pretty large collection. But when I met Chris and I found out about his collection, I realized that I have like a little amateur dinky box underneath my bed collection now. Like, it's just enormous, the amount of CDs. And when we say collection, we're talking about all Christian music, which is pretty fascinating when you go through the years and you find out, like I was mentioning it before, how many different genres. But yeah, Chris has definitely got me there by a lot. And again, it's you used to have more. You're actually getting rid of some, and you're selling, certain CDs here and there. But I can only imagine if you sold none and you were still collecting, how big it would be. My wife,
yeah, I know.
my wife, I'm sure you get this from your wife too at some point, but early on, she's like, "Really? What are you going to do with all these boxes?" I'm like, "I'm keeping them." She's like, "Yeah, we have them all like digitally." Like, because I remember one winter here in Canada, I'm like, what's a good project? I'm going to basically convert every one of these CDs. And I remember with iTunes early on, I put the CD in, rip it, done. And I literally converted, I think it was like, close to 1,200 CDs. And that was a chore. That took a long time. I had piles and piles in my basement, but I just sat there as this like winter chore. And this was before really everything became really like digitalized. But I remember it was like, doing each one, had I waited a couple years, most of the stuff was online anyways, but there still is stuff, when we're collecting Christian music, Chris, have you ever noticed that there is still a lot of stuff that's not online? You can't get it in Apple, or you can't get through Spotify. It doesn't exist.
Yeah. there's something too, so this was a CD that I was showing you earlier, because if you guys are familiar with Canadian music, Christian music, we this is probably definitely the biggest band ever that came through Canada. This is a 1,000 Foot Crutch. They're still active today. This CD was released 1998. This is like a super rare CD. This is like a $50-$75 CD. And yeah, I mean, this is like super old school, 1998 stuff. But
these are my new two gems are these ones.
Let's see. Oh yeah, you told me you were getting those.
I know.
Yes,
I got them in the mail, and then this one here. Good old times, eh? Mad at the World.
Let me see. Mad at the World. Look at that. Those are pretty awesome. Those are some gems there. But you know what? There is something to, picking up a CD, and when you were younger, and you could go through, the liner notes and read about them and do all those things that you can't do digitally, right? I mean, that's what today, everybody's saying it's so much better, to go digital, but you miss out on so much with the.
I was bummed when Apple when you remember when Apple debuted the cover flow, when you could actually go through your CDs.
Yeah.
They got rid of that. Why did they get rid of that? That was like the closest thing to feeling like you have a collection and you're actually like, cycling through this collection. And
Right.
I don't think they have it around anymore. But I mean, I remember even getting an iPhone because I thought that was the coolest thing in the world. I'm like, oh my goodness, you can actually go through your whole collection like a CD collection. And then they just scrapped it. I mean, I don't know why they scrapped it. If anyone knows why they scrapped it, please let me know, because I'm very curious on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just all part of the agenda to take away anything that we can touch, feel, and see. Everything's going digital. Obviously, when we could talk about transhumanism and all those things of merging AI into us and all of these things. I mean, we're just taking away that, and I wanted to ask you. I'm going to ask you one of the hot seat questions, which is not a hot seat question. It's just a softball one now. So, what were your 5 go-to artists back in those praise.com ministry years, back in those 90s? What was your top 5, if you can even remember top?
Well, I mean, for sure, because these are the instant classics, but like DC Talk was for sure up there as far as Jesus Freak. I mean, that was massive. These would probably be the staples for a lot of people, but like, Jars of Clay, Newsboys, honestly, like I don't think I ever got sick of Newsboys. I think they're an incredibly talented band. I'm talking before Tate. I don't mind the newer stuff, but I'm more of a fan of Peter, as the front man, and Joel. But for me, you can't go wrong with Newsboys. I think I've seen Newsboys over a dozen times. No joke. Like, I've seen them a lot. I was talking to a friend.
What'd you think of? I was going to ask you before you moved on there. What'd you think of all those solo records, like Phil made and Jody Davis made?
They were good. I've never been a big fan. Like, to tell you the truth, I'm always more of a fan of a band than a solo artist. So, for example, Toby, he's come out with great stuff, but I never get into Toby Mac albums like I did DC Talk albums. It's been that way forever. So, for example, someone can break off on their own, and it loses its luster for me a little bit. I'm not saying they're not talented. They have some good songs. It's not the same. One other band I got to mention that I cannot forget is Delirious. Now, Delirious, I would say, is my all-time favorite of all time. So it's funny that I put it in 4th, but it's number 1 for sure. I think Delirious, they were pivotal in so many ways. I think that Delirious were fundamental in changing the Christian worship landscape. They did so much, for so many different areas. Very talented. I got to meet them many times. I mean, I became such a diehard in the 90s that we literally followed them around on tour. We got to know them really well. I actually have one of the very first flags that their wife made them. It has a D in it, and the wives actually sewed it together. I actually have it. But as far as collectibles, that's where you can't touch me, I don't think, because I've got so much Delirious stuff. No, I've got everything that Delirious has, including stuff like Drumstick Signed. I've got like lots of stuff from all of them, from Martin and everyone in the band. So I would say, like, as far as becoming a bit of a groupie way back in the days with a bunch of friends, Delirious was it. I mean, I was very disappointed when they called it quits. And even the reasons they called it quits was kind of silly, in my opinion. It's like, oh, I want to be an artist, and I want to go, run a company. I'm like, really, you're at your pinnacle. So I'm always disappointed. I'm sure many people are, when there's a good band and then they leave,
But they put out a ton of music for you, so there is a lot of music, lots of stuff that you can still listen to for
Yeah, and
years and years and years.
I purposely will, like, in these bands, I will purposely wait like 5 years because I don't want to wreck it. I don't want to listen to too much where you kind of, you get sick of it. So it's always nice when you can come back to music you haven't listened to it in like a decade. So I purposely haven't listened to Delirious in a long time because when I do start listening to it again, it will be like fresh and oh man. Yeah, the years with Delirious, like I said, following them around, it was pretty funny. So Martin used to do this thing all the time where he put on this hat and he'd go crazy on the stage. Well, one time we were out before the show and I bought like the same type of hat and I threw it on and stuff and he like looked down. It was the funniest reaction we ever got. But really great guys. And like it's funny too because you think that band, even when they were performing, you think, oh, a bunch of young guys. They were like not very young. Like Martin's not an older guy for sure. But really, really cool. I got to know because I was working at a Christian retail store. I was the first one in Canada to start bringing their stuff in before it actually hit Sparrow and it got signed. I was bringing in the can, like I was bringing in Live in the Can from UK.
Yeah,
I was bringing King of Fools in because I don't even know how I came across it, but I heard them and it was just like it was almost like people sometimes that register with U2. The minute they first heard U2, that was it. It was almost like Delirious. And I remember I was working in the Christian retail and we were the only Christian bookstore in Canada to have Delirious. So word started spreading, right? And they're like, what's going on? But I remember I had the record at one point because when they finally did bring Delirious in, they ran the U.S. or North American version of In the Can, and they ran a competition to see who could sell the most cans. It was just kind of like a fun little thing, and I won it for Canada. Like I would
and,
just yeah
and if people don't know that was a CD that came actually
in a
in a
can.
10
It
in a
came in a
can.
tin can. And
Yeah,
it was like you're listening to this like worship and you're like you'd never heard anything like it. It was like reminiscent of like a U2 slash Radiohead slash I don't know how you explain it, but it was like if you're into those kind of bands, and that was interesting too, because like when I got into all Christian music, I also looked into a lot of secular music, and I learned a lot through people like Pastor is it Joel Good Fight Ministries. If you look at goodfight.org,
yeah,
phenomenal.
yeah,
He has done so many amazing things. But I remember, a couple documentaries. Then he came out with one called "They Sold Their Souls for Rock and Roll." Well, when you went to his
yeah.
website, they had three versions. They had the hour version, the 3 hour version, the 10 hour version. I bought the 10
Yeah.
hour version. And I remember I watched that with people. Like we would do marathons, but I used a lot of those things. Another documentary was Hell's Bells. There was Hell's Bells,
How
and then there was Hell's
they
Bells
came
2.
out first. Yeah.
I
Mhm.
use those videos, and I mean, there's a guy actually in my city, and he's got a big family now. It's the funniest thing because we joke about it. But I remember bringing Hell's Bells over. He literally kicked me out of his house because it got to Jim Morrison, and he had a big poster of Jim Morrison on his wall, and he was really like a druggie and stuff. He's like, Jim Morrison's my God, get the hell out. He kicked me out. We joke about it now because he's a strong born again Christian, on fire for God and all that. But I'm like, dude, do you remember you kicked me out of your house, right? I laugh about it. And I think part of my whole ministry is I could relate because I was there. I used to laugh at Christians. I used to think it was ridiculous. So I think my tolerance or my patience has been a bit more maybe than some, or God's just given me that. But I use, like I said, music big time to minister both ways. Christian music to minister that way, but also, hey, isn't it interesting about the Beatles? Isn't it interesting about Michael Jackson? Isn't it interesting about U2? I mean, do you know how many
Elvis. Yeah.
Elvis, another one, but do you know like U2? There were so many books in Christian bookstores saying they're the messiahs, they're the prophets sent by God. There were book after book after book. Christians were praising Bono and U2. Well, when you start looking into U2, and I'll probably upset a lot of people here, maybe not, but you got to look into it. I mean, Coexist. I mean, they were nothing close to Christians. I mean, they're probably one of the greatest deceivers. But I'm guilty. I did get into U2 for a while, but I came out of it. God woke me up to it. But that was one area where I was like, because I believe the lie almost that they're a Christian band, because you'd hear it all the time.
Yeah.
U2 are Christian. They started Christian, Gloria, and they had like, all these great things. But over time, if you look at the progression of U2, it was almost like they were used to suck in the Christians, kind of like how Hannah Montana is used to suck in the girls, and then she turns into a slut, and doing crazy stuff on stage when she gets older. Like this is all designed on purpose. So like Hollywood, Disney, even the music industry use these really innocent figures. Even it says that the devil will be disguised as an angel of light. So I do believe that we have to be smart when we're looking into it. But going back to music, music has always played a major role. And again, to start off my entire, I guess, career getting into the web and getting into radio and all that kind of stuff, it was music, right? I mean, even when I started
Mhm.
with the radio station, part of me, I worked in newspaper, web, radio. My last one, I was thinking possibly I'll work in television. Again, this is all under advertising and marketing. But again, maybe to consult on a medium, because again, and again, maybe be a Christian type thing. But for me, it was always like, look at these mediums. But the Christian radio was a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun there. And again, it was fun being able to talk music. Like we're talking, you and I will get talking about music. Well, when you're dealing with a Christian radio station, you get a lot of people that have been in the music scene for quite a while. So it's pretty cool when you can talk to someone about the level of music history and stuff, because God used it in such a powerful way in my life. It will always, even though I know there's issues, there's problems, and people can be negative, to me, I say it's way better than secular music any day of the week. That's my
Yeah.
recommendation.
Well, yeah, and I'll touch on that for a second, but Joe Schimmel, that's the
Joe
name
Schimmel.
of
Joe Schimmel. Yeah.
yeah, Joe Schimmel. And that's, if you guys are want to look at those documentaries, it's goodfight.org. There's a lot of videos online. They
He's got them
post a
broken
lot of
down.
videos.
He's got a thing. If you go there, if you just go into Rolling Stones or you go to Beatles, he'll show the clip from every movie automatically for free. So you can just pick an artist and you'll see the clip from the movie. It's really cool.
And those are so really well researched.
Yeah.
I mean, so many people want to jump all over and because they like the band or they like the song. Sort of like the sucking in approach. If you watch the episode on George Harrison from the Beatles, and he sang that song. What was the name of that song? It just left my brain. What is that? Do you know what song I'm talking about?
I'm not really versed on the Beatles.
It's called My Sweet Lord.
Oh, sweet. Oh yeah. Oh, that's horrible. Yes.
So his whole point of creating that song was to get Christians singing along to this song, My Sweet Lord, and then it gets to the part where he drops very subtly the Hare Krishna right into there, and that's what the whole song was all about. All dealing with Eastern mysticism, Hare Krishna, all this stuff, right? And how wild it is. Most people don't even understand. The Beatles are so instrumental for bringing things over, like yoga. Making Eastern.
They had Aleister Crowley on the very back of their Sgt. Pepper, and they said in an interview, the people in the back row are the most influential on the band.
Yeah, and in the front, you can see. I mean, they do a great job breaking that down. And in the front of that cover, is Welcome Rolling Stones, and you can see they adopted him into.
They were friends. All these. They were working together. You know what blew my mind, though? I got to mention this because I'm sure a lot of people don't know this. The one song that blew my mind was "We Are the World" by Michael Jackson, and all the the 80s, the aid thing they did for Africa. We are the world. Yeah. We are the children. Right. Do you remember the breakdown of that one? Nobody
refresh.
Well, the craziest thing about it is nobody had caught it for like a decade. And all of a sudden he was the first. I believe it was him or it was another guy. They came forward and it was like no one caught it. But in that, there's so many bad lyrics in that song. But the one that blow your mind, especially as people, believers right now are listening to this, ask yourself the question. In the line where it says, "You are the God that turned the stones into bread. We are the world. We are the children." Now, stop. When did God ever change stones into bread? I'll ask you, Chris. What's the only reference in the Bible where stones and bread, right? The Satan was tempting Jesus to turn the stones into bread. But in that song, they're praising and thanking God. They're saying, "You're the God that turns the stones into bread." It is so subtly wicked. We are the world. And here's the crazy thing. The people around Michael Jackson at the time said it was incredible that Michael Jackson, it was almost like it was downloaded to him. He came up with the entire song in like 7 minutes, they said. They said it came to him instantly, had it all down. And Michael Jackson even admitted it was like it was written in another world at another time. It just came to him. He wrote it down. But in there, it says a lot of blasphemous, really bad stuff. But isn't it interesting that the whole world's thanking God? Of course, they bring God into it. And they say, "You're the God that changed the stones into bread." And the only time that's ever mentioned in any religious text is the time that Satan says, "If you're hungry, turn the stones into bread."
Hmm.
That's devilish, man. That is so sly that no one catches that for a decade until, somebody finally catches that. That is, I mean, no Christians had caught that for 10 years.
Yeah. So you know what? I think there's a lot of things I don't agree with. The overall take of Good Fight Ministries. Um, they have some great content though. So just
Oh yeah.
like any good creation
Take
ministry,
the good,
they got
take the
great things.
good, throw out the bad. I mean, again, you're always, no matter who you talk to, and I say this all the time, name any two Christians that agree 110% with each other. The longer you get
Yeah.
to know someone, you're going to find out things you disagree with. It's just a matter of life. So this whole idea that, and there are certain things, but I'll tell you, the amount of amazing stuff that they brought to the table, sometimes it's really sad that something will happen and they'll discount all that previous work, right? You never know where they're on
Yeah.
the journey. Maybe they went way off track. That doesn't mean that maybe at one point they were on track. The fact is, it's good information, but sometimes you just got to use discernment and
Yeah.
decide what God wants you to watch and what He doesn't want you to watch.
They also have a great documentary on the history of the pre-tribulational rapture as well. So they do have some really good videos. I own a few of them. So yeah, goodfight.org. You can check them out. So yeah, you got one more band to name. You only named four.
I know, I
Um,
know. I'm like, yeah, it's a tough one. Do you know your five?
do I know my five from what era?
Well, I'm just at all time. Just make it easy
All
because this
time.
it's not
Oh
video
man,
era, just all time.
that's really tough.
I know. That's what I'm saying.
I
I'm
would
not
have to break it down. I would have to break it down genre wise, because there's too many. There's just way too many.
I know.
You
Well,
know,
that's like someone saying your favorite movie. It's like someone asking you, name it's really tough. But I mean, I got 4 to 5. I will think of the fifth because I mean, there is someone there, but I don't want to say something that all of a sudden I come back and say, no, that's not right. But no, those would definitely be the top four. I'll come up with the fifth one, but it's tough. It's really tough.
yeah. There was um uh, there's just too many. There was just way too many artists. I mean, uh, some of them I get to now be good friends with.
I know.
Like Dirt. If you guys seen our episode with George Moss, I was a manager of one of the guys I worked with, was friends with George. That's how we connected a long time ago, and I met George. So now I get to have a relationship with George on a totally different level.
Speaking of George, is his album coming out?
He claims he's working on new music, and so
Cool.
I'm going to hold it to
Cool.
Take on the World 19. He's also got a festival before that he's going to launch some music.
Oh,
I think
cool.
Take on the World 19 will be he'll be able to do some new stuff there on the night of the Becca Shea concert. So he's going to be doing some new stuff. So yeah, we're excited. He's got some cool stuff. I know he's in the studio working on stuff. So super excited.
I'm excited. Yeah, I'm excited. It's been a long time for him to come out with he's had a few things here and there, but to have a complete new album, it's been a while for George, and he's incredibly talented, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what he does with his new project.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you my story real quick on music. I was a little different than you, so I'll spare my whole come to salvation story. But I grew up in a Christian home, and Christian music wasn't pushed other than what was maybe on the radio or things like that. Maybe some vinyl records back from the day. Because I guess they call Liz was telling me earlier today, it's a exennial, which means we have you may be this too. It's somebody who was born in the late 70s to the early 90s.
No.
It means you had an analog childhood and a digital adulthood. So, definitely that was my case. So, I grew up with vinyl records and, all those kind of fun things, cassette tapes and boom boxes and all that stuff.
My uncle gave me an 8-track player.
Awesome, man. Yeah. It was never really pushed that I could only listen to a certain type of music. So, I was kind of like every other kid and just listened to what was on the radio. And little did I know those things affected, where I was at in my, young spiritual journey, because I did get saved at a younger age. And, by the time you get to high school and by the time you get out of high school, you're listening to stuff, and that talks profanity and things that I don't even do. I didn't swear. I didn't. If everybody knows my story, I don't smoke. I don't drink. I don't. Never did drugs. But I would. Never had sex before marriage. But I would listen to music that glorified every single one of those things, and it was not producing any fruit. It was just dead. I was going nowhere in my walk, and music was something that was a stronghold holding me down, because it was those things. I was really big into, now this may age me, but if you remember early on when Napster came out, I was really big into, the illegal downloading, because you can get all these songs that you could never get before, all this secular stuff. Yeah. And, all the remixes of this and that, and, this alternative version of a song, and, all these things I was like really into, and making my own mixtapes, which I still make to this day. People think I'm crazy. So I still make them, and me and Liz and Riley, we drive in the car to CDs. Now I don't do the plug in the phone and have a Spotify playlist. I do make the Spotify playlist to figure out which songs I'm going to use, and then I will burn them. But I don't do that in the car. I still go with the old school CD and have to clean it off sometimes. And it's skipping a little bit. All right, I got to burn a new one, right? So that's still me. 2019. That's me. So I was going with the Christian music in my life, or the secular music in my life, and it was just getting me nowhere. And the church that I grew up in, they built a new building, and they were looking for people to lead youth ministry. And Liz had come from a really strong youth group that I got to experience, because I went to a smaller church, she went to a bigger church, and they were really driven. And those were the years that really helped form Liz's spiritual journey into just staying strong in her faith. Maybe they didn't teach everything that we know now about, obedience or this or that, but it was extremely important and vital time in her journey. And I got to sit back and watch that. I was part of it for a year, and I had never been a part of anything like that before. Everything we did was on a really small scale, and that was on a big scale. We did missions trips and, feeding the poor, and, just doing a lot of, really good service. And, I was exposed to some Christian, music at that time. I was exposed to DC Talk super early on. And Stryper back in the 80s. My sister went to a Stryper concert and got in trouble by my parents. But, there were times that, like, I was exposed to stuff. And, I thought the first, like, DC Talk album I heard of, I'm listening to secular hip hop or something. And my friend's like, just gets this. And then another friend later on, he found all these Christian, like, metal. He was into that. And I was like, this is weird or strange. So I didn't get it. And then it wasn't until me and Liz were getting serious in our relationship, and the church that we were in, they built a building, and they wanted to start a youth ministry. And so they were looking for people to help run this ministry. And there was another couple who just graduated Christian college. And so they were coming in, and we were like, hey, well, we can help out. And this was very instrumental in where we're at today with Take on the World, because it gave us those organizing, administration skills that we just ran the youth group from behind the scenes. And this was like 2000 that this all kicked off, 99, 2000. And it was 1999 that I had amassed a huge collection of secular CDs, burned CDs, made CDs. I was going to the library. I was getting, downloading from Napster. I was taking stuff. I had a old school, which I recently sold, which was an old school CD burner, not attached to a computer. It was attached. It would attach to your, for you guys who don't know, it would attach to a stereo where you could record your vinyl, cassettes, CDs. You can rip all that, and then you can put it on an actual CD. It's sold for like $90 now. So, and it was like maybe $200 back in the day. So I had gotten one of those, and we were converting all the music, and I had all these CDs that I had, while still claiming my faith, and still read the scripture and went to church, and was not doing anything bad, not doing those things. And the minute that we did the first youth ministry, and the kids are talking about the music they're listening to, and I'm going, I listen to the same stuff. It was such a gut punch in the stomach of, what are you doing? And I'm supposed to be an example, and from that moment on, I needed to get that out of my life. And so it was so vital for me as a young person to have things that I could cling to that could address, my individuality of, the styles of music that I was interested in.
Sure.
And, thankfully for like things, even like Napster at the time, I was starting to experience like Christian rock and, Christian hip hop music. And
there really was no excuse. It was almost like God had it to a point where you had no excuse. You couldn't be like, oh, they don't have hip hop, or they don't have the music I like, because some people would say that. And I used to say to people, I'm like, I'm sorry, but you're at a position where he's giving you no choice for that argument. You can't use that argumentation anymore, because there is a diversity of every single music class you can think of.
Oh yeah, totally. And that was my right there. It's like, I was starting to like turn there. We have a store here called the Record Exchange, or the Exchange, and you can take your CDs in, and they can give you money for, and you can get a store credit. And I got to this point where I had amassed such a huge collection of these CDs.
So were you making up for lost time? Is that kind of your whole thing? Were you making up for lost time?
Well, I would say initially, yeah, because right then I missed a whole generation of music, where some people say it was the good, bad, and the ugly, because it definitely was, within Christian music as it had its growing pains. But I would say there was a point where I was going to try to go and sell those secular CDs back to the stores, and I'm going, I don't want anybody to listen to these things. These things lead you to death. They lead you to, thankfully none of them, I never got to the point to where they were really affecting me other than my thoughts.
I had a big bonfire. It was fun.
Yeah. And so all I did was I put them in a big garbage can, and we just pitched them. So, Liz was like, we were cleaning them off, getting them ready to sell. And I just said, you know what? Can't do it. Yeah. And from that moment, we have not looked back, of letting that influence. And I think, now looking back, we talk a lot about spiritual nature of the law, and we talk about clean and unclean eating. And, we absolutely believe in that. But, when that law, because it's so spiritual, it teaches us of everything clean and unclean. We need to guard what we put into our eyes, no believer is going to fault that, right? And then what we put into our ear. And I think, the music, it plays a huge factor in that. And then, one thing I was going to say is, and don't think that the things that have influenced Christian secular music, like the occult, that they have not stemmed over. And I know so many of that stuff. I've been friends with somebody who's ran a Christian music label for, he ran it for over 20 years. So I know the good, the bad, the ugly. So, I know I will probably get messages. Do you guys know about why are you speaking so good about this? When there's trust me, I as much as I'm a savant of the music, I know all the good, the bad, the dirt, the ugly, the occult behind it, this behind it. Yeah. I could do a whole show on all that stuff and blow people's mind. So I know all of that stuff. And but still at the end of the day, I could walk away going, what has it spoken to my life, of where I'm at in my journey of and it was instrumental. So, some of those guys that even I know so many of the artists that have walked away. There was one artist that I found right away on there that wasn't extremely overtly spiritual. He didn't say Jesus, he didn't say God in all of his songs, but his lyrics spoke to me, and in a way that kept me in this journey and kept me in this walk, and it was a great bridge to where that it took me over there. And that was this artist who's not even walking correctly. I don't even know if he's given up on his faith. I brought him out to my church. I've done shows with them. Super guy. But that was Pigeon John. I don't know if you know him, but
no, oh yeah,
he had just some songs. People say they were silly, they were this. But he spoke to me at a time from transitioning from secular music over to, things that were talking about God and that were, that were done in such a way, in a style that this was not only, interesting, but it was cool. It felt, it was, something that was, yeah. So that kind of, that kind of started it all for me. Most people, that leave it, they go to like a, really overtly Christian band. And that didn't necessarily happen for me right away. It was all this other stuff. And then all of a sudden, then we're getting into, this artist, that artist, and then all of a sudden we're seeing.
Did you ever escalate? What I found interesting with Christian music, did you ever escalate to like worship? Because at the beginning of my journey, I was like, no, that I'm not into that worship stuff like that. I wanted rock and rap. But I found as I got into Christian music and I stayed the course, and my mind would actually, I'd be working away, but my mind was on that. And when I slept, I would listen to Christian music. I always say, how important that is. If you're listening to secular music, at least don't listen to it when you're sleeping, because it's dangerous stuff, right? There's a lot of stuff going on with lyrics. But I did notice this transition that as I continued on, I went to this music that I thought never in a million years would I even want to sing, let alone listen to. And here I am. It became my favorite music, was just ultimately just praising God. And I'm like, so I noticed that it came from a point where it'd be like music and lyrics that was kind of Christian and stuff, to outright straight on worshiping of the Father, So for me, I found with a lot of people that I would kind of see the same thing happen as they got into Christian music over the years. Pretty soon they were like, now they're just listening to straight worship. So for me, you can have your argumentation, but I still look at, there's bands out there and there's probabilities, but a lot of that music is glorifying, and it really comes down to you. Are you using that to glorify the Father? It's how do you use that music, right? So it's a tough.
Yeah,
we could have a whole show on the whole debate between Christian music and secular music, and what Christian music is good. Yeah,
there was this. And I'm friends with the guy. I haven't spoke to him in a long time, but there was an artist at that same time, because I went to church, and we were part of a youth group, and they did praise and worship. So it was not that it was foreign from me, but was it the first thing that I ran to or went to? But there's a guy, his name's MG the Visionary, and I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he was on Tooth and Nail Records, and he put out an album. It's called Sinner's Prayer, and he's not even credited because he didn't want to even put his name on the album. It's called Sinner's Prayer, and it was the first Christian hip hop worship album. And I'm like, this is gonna be super corny, and I'm like, that's just I'm definitely not interested in it. And I had given it a try, and those songs, it took it. I still love it today. It is a fantastic album. But yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, I think the deeper that we get, some of that stuff is definitely, it's just milk, right? Mm-hmm. But milk is extremely important
in your journey. Yeah.
In your journey. I mean, if so many people want to skip the milk and go right to the meat, and that's almost impossible to do. There is that aspect of that milk that is so needed. And as we mature, then we're ready for that meat, and, I was geocentric at that time. I had no clue what that really meant. I knew that the earth didn't move. I knew it was the center of the universe. It didn't change me. It didn't make me want to dig in the scriptures and, expose the lies of the heliocentric world. It didn't make me do that. The fullness of his truth did, because that's where I got more of that meat, and I was ready for that meat, right? So, oftentimes we can't downplay the role of milk in our journey, because we all needed it at some point, and some we may need milk in certain areas, where some people are ready for the meat in other areas. So yeah, you're definitely right. And nowadays, when the words, the aspect of why we listen to music is to glorify the Creator. That's what He created it for. So yeah, we're looking for that, more of that meat, but yeah, that role of that milk. So that's why those styles. That's why I'm a big defense of those styles, because I saw it change in my life. I saw it change so many young people. That's why I totally support stuff that George Moss does, because he's out there trying to disciple people and meet them on their level. And yeah, so some of the hip hop stuff, maybe some milk, and your journey, you need meat.
Yeah,
you need this. But that young adult, that teenage child that he's trying to reach, they need that milk. They need that guard to be broken down. They need to say, hey, this is cool, this is fun. Once it's broken down, their ears become open. They're ready to hear the Spirit. They're ready to hear
and
learn.
I found in ministering and evangelism through music, it really helps when you could have a comparison. So if they like Jay-Z, here's a Jay-Z, someone that sounds like Jay-Z, or Kanye West or whatever. But what I remember, it was almost like, what was that person into? Metallica. You'd find the equivalent, and it would resonate with them. Like, oh wow, I didn't even know this music existed. And they're like, so especially when hip hop, when people realized that there was actually hip hop that wasn't degrading women, that wasn't glorifying violence, that wasn't swearing every other word, they're like, wow. And it's actually, I remember a couple people I, was witnessing to, and they said these guys got some skills. Like they were getting props to these hip hop artists, even the fact that they weren't swearing and degrading women. And so it was interesting how it just changed, because for me, music was like, what, this exists? A lot of people didn't even know it existed. I found that in my journey, that people were like blown away when they found out that I was talking to someone the other day. I was on the plane, and someone said, we were talking about hip hop. He said, is there a lot of Christian hip hop? I go, is there a lot of Christian hip hop? Yeah, because he had heard of NF, right? He had heard of NF, and he kind of heard he had some Christian leanings, and he heard about Lecrae. I said, dude, like, look into Lecrae's label, or just look into Christian hip hop. I would say out of genres, it's probably one of the fastest growing, or the most artists. Christian hip hop is huge. And if
and by the way, hold on. We have seen the Lecrae exposed video, so continue.
Oh yeah, and exactly. And I mean, I don't want to get into it. I'm sure people would be typing, these guys are bad, these guys are bad. But what I'm saying is, when you're dealing with somebody lost, and you're using a medium to basically get respect, but also to kind of preach that word to them. I know many people, regardless, and people say Lecrae's evil. I know people personally that have become stronger in their walk, or become saved through his music. So again, we can look at this all the time, and we can say these are evil. I'm not putting on my channel, I'm promoting these things, but we're having a candid discussion. We're talking about our journey. We're saying, what meant stuff in our journey and our walk. And there's no doubt, I don't care what people say about music. It was a huge part of my journey, huge part of ministering to people. I've seen the power that it can minister, and it can change people's lives through basically the gospel, and through music. And there's a lot, I would say hip hop, to tell you the truth, is one of the greatest, they're the greatest sermons you can get in music. I mean, it's literally full on sermons to a beat. Some of those sermons, like some of those artists are like, you're going to church almost. I mean, you're getting a full sermon, and the stuff is deep. We're talking meat. Some of those some of those artists, they take it serious, and they really study the word for a few years before they even go on tour, or before they do an album, because when they understand the importance of, they're going to be teaching through that music. So yeah, not everyone's good, and you can pick and choose, but to sit there and say that everyone's bad, if something is really helping you in your growth, and helping you go closer to God, and in your study, and getting into the Bible more, it can't be a bad thing. Anything leading you to the Bible is good. That's, again, going back to the flat earth discussion. I've never seen more people turning to the Bible than any other quote unquote conspiracy, a cover up, some trying to hide the truth of the world. No one ran to the Bible in 9/11. No one ran to the Bible with chemtrails. But I'll tell you, when you start bringing up that NASA's lying, and they've lied about this world, people are desperate, and they want to know what the Bible says. And not only do they want to know what it says, they're intrigued to find out what these verses have to say about the creation. If this is a lie, and I was taught a lie, I want to know what the Bible says. So people that say that flat earth or enclosed cosmology is a psyop, understand that everything in the world, Satan tries to take you away from the Bible, not closer to it.
Yeah, I want to share a story, and this is probably the best time.
Sure.
So I have an exclusive story. Nobody's heard this before. Liz has heard it. So Sunday, I went to the flea market and I was looking, for different things. And I stumbled across a guy. Anytime there's CDs, I got to check to see if there's like some CDs, Christian CDs or something.
Yeah.
Either things to sell or, stuff from my collection, right? Because I'm a nerd like that, right? So I stumbled across this young guy and this young girl. They have a booth and they had CDs. So I'm like, cool, I'm gonna check this out. And I started looking, and I'm like, whoa, there's all these For Today, Sleeping Giant. I don't know if you know those bands.
I know who that is.
So they're all extremely evangelical, extremely gospel based, like hardcore rock bands, like hardcore. And I'm like, whoa, like and then it's like the whole entire box is all of this genre. Like it's all Christian, it's all hard rock. And I start talking to the guy, like, and it started breaking my heart because he's starting to talk to me. He's like, yeah, I don't listen to these anymore. And I already knew right when he said that, that these were, one, his CDs, and two, I knew he walked away from his faith. And so I began to talk to him, and he said, yeah, I'm really more into the secular stuff right now. And I said, well, did you walk away from your faith? He said, I don't know if that's too much to ask. He's like, no. And it led into a conversation. He said, absolutely, I've walked away from my faith. And the Bible does not rectify with what I believe any longer. I was a Christian for the last 15 years of my life, from childhood. Grandparents took him to church, went to his grandparents' church with his parents. He had another box on the side of worship CDs that he used to just pass out when he'd meet people. He would just hand them these sealed. He used to buy sealed worship CDs and just hand them out. They were from his church, and inside of there, it would be a way to get a hold of him. So he stopped giving away, but at the flea market, he had them, and he was just like, I got to get rid of these things because I want these things gone, because they remind him of all the times. And so, I started talking to him, and he started telling me all the things that he was having, scripturally, some of the scripture issues, some of the issues about, the typical atheist stuff about, why the God of the the Old Testament was like this, but if Jesus is God and he's like this, right? So I started talking about the Nephilim. I started talking about a lot of things. I started talking to him about, the role of law and grace. I started talking about a lot of these things that he had no idea about as a believer for 15 years, and completely now would be considered agnostic. I don't think he is full-blown atheist, but he believes in something. And he said, well, I can tell you it's not the God of the Bible, but he's searching for this higher power. So he's in this mode, and he had just got done talking to one of his friends who was a pastor right before I got up. And the pastor was just praying with him, okay? So how crazy is this story? Pastor prayed for him. And he's like, yeah, whatever. And lo and behold, then I walk in the door, right?
Yeah.
And so we're starting to talk about these things, and I'm still searching. I'm talking while searching through the CDs. Sure. I'm making sure that he knows I'm going to buy from him. I ended up buying basically the whole box of 60-something CDs.
Of course you did.
Yeah, I bought it. I mean, I was like, at that point, I'm just going to buy everything he's got, because, he's out of work. And I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to buy the whole box. So I just bought it. Yeah. And I had to meet up with him later. And so, we had a really good discussion. I started telling him about the conference. And I dropped the biblical cosmology bomb on him. And, nice. I'm like, you know what? I don't know you. You don't know me.
Yeah.
And you've walked away from your faith. And I started, telling him a little bit about it at the conference. And I said the word biblical cosmology. He stopped me. He said, are you just talking about the sun, moon, and the stars? What are you talking about? I said, well, funny you should ask me about that, because I talked about satanic ritual abuse. I talked about some other things in there. And all of a sudden, he got really interested when well, you can see him and his girlfriend's eyes like, what did you just say? And I'm like, I know you guys are going to think I'm crazy, tinfoil hat. I said, yes, the Bible is a flat earth book. I said, for many believers, either this is completely new to them, or, they want to ignore that the scripture. So I began to tell him this whole thing. And he said, yeah, you know what? I have friends who, they make fun of flat earthers. They do this. And there's a guy that I know at a previous job who was telling me about it. And, but this is the first time I heard you connect it to the Bible and why it's important. I spoke really fast, as I normally do, not as fast as you do.
No.
So I was able to get a lot out in this time. And he didn't have the CDs in the case. He actually left them at home by accident and didn't think he was going to sell any because he didn't have any of the CDs. So I had to actually go back to him. So, I'm praying about, what I'm supposed to do. And the only thing was, when I see him, I'm going to invite him to the conference and say, hey, you and your girlfriend have free tickets to come to the conference. And so I meet up with him. He's super excited. He's got this big bag of like 65 CDs that he's pawning off to somebody. He only charged me $50. And I'm like, dude, that's a great deal. I mean, you got some really good gems in here. And I'm like, well, you know what? I feel compelled. I want to invite you to the conference, and I want to do it on my dime. I actually would have to pay, because we have a grounds fee that we have to cover for every person on site. It's like, you know what? I'm just going to cover your whole cost to be there. If you want to come, you can come one day, you can come 3 days, you can come at all. And his answer was, okay, man, I'll see if I'm busy or not. And really nice guy, played it off. And I didn't think anything of it. I'm like, I'm going to still mail him the tickets. I'm going to make up some tickets. I'm not making up tickets for anybody else, but I'm going to make up tickets for this guy. And we're driving home tonight. Crazy. And there's some other things going on that happened, some more confirmations. And I get a text from this guy. And he said, hey, Chris, just wondering if you could give me some more details on your conference and where I can get extra tickets. I have a few friends who are interested in coming.
Cool.
And at this point, he's super excited to get these in the mail. He is confirmed agnostic, walked away from his faith. He knows this is a biblical conference that's going to talk about biblical things that churches won't touch. And just that alone intrigued him enough to say, you know what? I want to come. And I almost guarantee the pastor guy is interested in coming as well after talking with him, because he was definitely hardened, a very nice guy. He was definitely hardened to want to come back to Christianity or biblical things, or however we put it. He was very hardened to do that. And I explained a lot of things on what I believe and how we're a little different. And so we're super excited. So
that makes it all worth it. Just that one story alone, just how that can, it's stories like that makes it all worth it. It really does. Because I mean, who knows what that journey and the conclusion of that story, but I think it's definitely going to be positive for sure, regardless.
And music. And it's all centered right back around music again. If I wouldn't have known what those bands were, if I didn't know, what he was into, I would have not known how to even start a conversation with this guy. And we started talking about the music first. He's like, yeah, right on, man. How do you know this stuff, man? It's like, I don't never meet anybody like you. And then all of a sudden this happened. So, but that's a whole, it's all a Yahweh thing of where he's going to, pull you and put you. And we have to be ready for that. We have to be a vessel for him. So whether that, then we need to be healthy to make, to go out there and do those things. You need to be in some cases you need to be all things to all people at certain times. You need to reach them on their levels of where they're at,
Sure.
just to break down their strongholds. I don't know what's going to happen with this young guy, but I'm excited just to even get the chance to have him come and just continue that relationship.
Nothing's by accident. The very fact that he reached out to you and he's already been, thinking of it and that he's coming, is very cool. I'd love to see how this all turns out. Regardless, at the very least, seeds will be planted, and I'm sure stuff that's presented at Take on the World 2019 will blow his mind. And the very fact that he's open to these things, I think it could be a pivotal point in his life for sure. I think God might have used that entire meeting through music, at a flea market, definitely for his purposes.
Yeah.
So I guess we'll see how it all.
And then he's going to want his CDs back. Yeah. Then he's going to want his CDs back.
So, yeah, he'll be like, can I have them back? I don't. Oh yeah, I want them back. Yeah. I'm back into Christian music. That's funny. That's a funny segue back into Christian music. Yeah. No, that's really cool. That's really encouraging. Like I said, for me, that's what it's all about. A soul, early on, heaven rejoices over one. The prodigal son, when one comes back. So for me, it's all about that. It's worth even just one person. And I say that, like, quite honestly, if one person's life is changed, with the work that God's done through my ministry, it's all worth it. We always get all human and about numbers and stuff, but really the reality is if one person's life is changed for eternity, it was all worth it. You can't put a price on a person's soul. And really, there's high stakes. I mean, we truly are in a spiritual war. And this is serious stuff. I mean, we're commanded to put on the armor and wage this war spiritually. So as Christians, we got to take it serious, but also understand that we do have the authority in Christ, and that we do have, we are victorious. But I think it's important to know who you are, your identity in Christ, and understand that position, and kind of go forward. But when you do have these opportunities, for me, like I said, everything that's driven me ever since that day when I surrendered my life in my parents' basement after watching the Jesus film, from that point on, everything has always been about evangelism. It's always been about talking to someone, like you said, be all things to all people. Not beating them over the head with it, but just being there. I have so many people, even in the flat Earth community. You'd be shocked at some people that reach out to me for prayer or asking questions, or it's just little by little planting those seeds and being a good representation of it all. But I take it very serious, and I know being on the front lines, it can be daunting. It's not for the faint of heart, and we're under massive attack. I mean, I had a pastor tell me this one time, and he said, you have to understand that all Christians are targets, but there's certain individuals God will choose, and they will be bullseyes as far as Satan's attack. So Satan, attacks all Christians, sure, but some are targets. I say, Christians are targets, but some are designated to be bullseyes, and that's where the attention is. And anyone that's truly on the front lines, they become bullseyes. So, if you're listening to this, and honestly, you've got, intercessory prayer, this is what you're called to. Prayer is so important. You can support people that are on the front line so many ways, not just financially. When you hear people say, can you please support? Don't think it's always financial. Prayer is so incredibly important. You can support by just sharing, getting the word out. As censorship increases, this is the way that we can all work. We're all parts of the body. And just because you see someone on different levels, in this war, understand that your position and where God has called you is equally important. You have a role to play. And you can be like, well, what am I going to do? I don't know anyone, or I'm not doing anything. I'm not doing a video. You can do something by just sharing this video right now, or getting the information on the conference. You don't know who's going to come to that conference, just like you said, you start talking to this guy and all of a sudden now he might be dragging a pastor out and some friends out. So just little things like that. But these conferences that, Chris and Bailey are doing, it's so profound, because not only is it bringing the body together, but it's also reaching out to the world and the lost. And that is the most crucial thing that we're all called to do, the Great Commission, which we're all called to do.
Yeah. Excellent, man. Yeah. No. Well, hey, I don't know where you're at with time, how much longer
we should probably wrap up. It's probably midnight for you, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I can,
we can go for a bit, but
it's really all about the guest. So, I'm going to open it up now. So since we're going to close out, I mean, we covered so much stuff.
Sure.
Our conversations last longer than this typically. So, if you've ever talked to Robbie Davidson on the phone, hey, we did an 8-hour episode once. Go check that out. Now you see TV.
I'm kind of partly responsible for that one, by the way.
Yeah, it was a blast. But I will tell you this. you just told me you spoke to somebody on the phone for 6 hours, and you probably didn't have enough things to talk about. If you guys have not had a chance to sit down with Robbie, and you don't know Robbie, you may have preconceived notions about Robbie, whatever the case may be. If you're coming to take on the World 19, sit down, talk to Robbie, and he's going to become your friend, because he's going to care about you and you're going to care about him. So that's my encouragement for you guys to, when you come to take on the world, come meet Robbie. So we're going to go into question and answers time. So
Sure. Yeah.
I've got some hot seat questions for you, but I'm going to open it up to the chat. I'm watching the chat. So I want you guys to throw out some questions. You can ask them to me, but I prefer them go to Robbie. Robbie, you can ask me a hot seat question.
Yeah, you'll have to answer, like, ask me, because I'm not looking at the chat, right? I just have.
Okay. Yep. I'll add. Yep. So if we get some questions,
Sure.
It could be anything, guys. So I'm gonna start off with, okay. And you got to answer this. All right. This is a real serious one.
I was told that I can pass.
You can pass.
Go ahead. Go ahead. I rarely ever pass. I rarely pass. Go ahead.
Okay. Robbie Davidson. This is the one that you can't pass.
Yeah, this. I already see the look on your face, so I already know what's coming.
When you were touring the countryside, and probably even going US bound with touring with Delirious, basically touring with Delirious as super fans. When did you have time during those years to train in the CIA?
That's actually really funny. Well, to correct you on the touring across US and Canada, we only really did 4 conferences, 4 concerts in a row. So when we followed them, we didn't do, like, the whole leg or anything. But yeah, the whole CIA, that's interesting. I joke around because a lot of people are saying deep state agent. They'll say, oh, Robbie, is a deep state agent. I say it's impossible. I'm Canadian. If anything, I'm a deep province agent.
So that is, and it's coming from people within the community saying some things like that. So you know what, we're putting on this secret show, we're putting everything.
Come meet me if you're on the fence and you kind of think I might be a shill or CIA. Sit down with me. My wife's going to be there. My family's going to be there. I'm looking forward to it. This is the first year I'm actually bringing my family, not just to take on the world, but really any conference like that over the 4 days. So I'm really excited. But you won't just be able to meet me. You'll be able to meet my whole family. We're just normal, just like you. And honestly, this year I said to Chris, I said, make sure this year with my scheduling, I do have time to spend time with a lot of people, because that's really important to me, is to get to know a lot of people that are going to be coming out. So I will have the time. Chris has confirmed it for me that I definitely will have the time to meet every one of you. So come out and yeah, feel free. Let's have dinner, or
Well, here we go. Hot seat question number 2.
Okay.
Number 2. Here we go. All right. Well, hey, I was a guest on your show with Nate Wolf.
Yes.
And that episode hasn't been aired yet.
Yes.
Okay. And we talked. It was pretty much for the first time of any of your episodes, maybe other than the Rob Skeeb episode, but I didn't listen to it all, where you really didn't get to speak, because for some reason I just had run, especially that second hour. I just did not stop talking. It just, my mouth just kept going.
Yep.
So, and it's pretty much like a expose on. It's like all Torah, elephant in the room stuff. We went to town on it. So here's 2 hot seat questions.
Sure.
One, if you release it, why haven't you released it?
Okay.
Two, if you don't release it, I would be okay with that.
Oh no, that's interesting you brought that up, because actually just last night I was talking to Pastor Nate, and interesting enough, it's a lot of work to put them together. I was busy doing a lot of stuff. Well, actually last night I actually pulled an all-nighter and I did 6. And I've actually worked on a bunch to get caught up, because I'm way behind in getting them onto YouTube, including yours. But it's funny you just mentioned it, because last night I just did like a marathon, and I did one after another. I've got multiple ones coming up, including yours, because no, I wouldn't miss anyone. All of them are really great. I loved every one of the guests. I mean, we're on show 27 this weekend, so there's a lot of shows because I think there's only about 7 that are up on YouTube. So I've got a
Yeah.
lot, but I did get about 7 of them done tonight. I'm planning to do about another 4 or 5. It does take considerable amount of work, with believe it or not, because there's a bunch of editing. I've got to put a bunch of stuff together, and then the rendering. They're really big files. They're 2-hour shows, and they render really high. But no excuse. The funny thing is, I was just working on it last night. Pastor Nate I talked to him a bunch today, and I said, good news. We can actually start ripping these out instead of one a week, or one every 2-3 weeks. I can start putting them out like 2 to 3 shows a week until they get caught up. So yeah, your show's coming. It's probably coming next week or the week after.
So if you want to hear Pastor Nate, Robbie Davidson, and myself chat about Torah, and from all the controversy to all the things, don't miss that episode. So there's my plug for you guys to go check that out. We're not going to talk about it here on the Secret Show. That's your job to go and do that over on their channel, Celebrate Truth, when they launch that. You guys are not going to want to miss it. It was a blast. Now, the third question.
All right.
What made you guys? So you did another show. You, Nate, and you had another guest where I was this focal point. It felt like for like 30 minutes of that show. And it's like, why are you guys talking about me? I'm like a nobody. And all of a sudden, of course, you did that because my good friend Tony Stover was your guest. So why in the world would you guys do that to me on the air? There's your hot seat question. Why would you do that to me? But it was great. It was funny.
I was blown away. I think I had just learned, either they're on that show or before that, I honestly didn't know that you'd known each other for so long. I knew that you were close, but I didn't know the connection that well before any of this, you guys, have grown up together. So I was blown away, to tell you the truth. So when it started transitioning and talking about you, and then I think it was Pastor Nate that said, Chris is watching. I'm like, okay. So when we probably wouldn't have talked as much about you had I not known you were listening. But the minute I heard you were listening, I'm like, okay, let's keep her going on Chris, because you're listening anyways, right? And I mean, quite honestly, you're a big part of it. And like you said, you're nobody, but you are a huge essential part. I mean, this is your third. You and Liz have put on. Is this the third take on the world? I mean, you're doing phenomenal stuff behind the scenes. Like you said, you're doing a lot, and especially when it comes to take on the world and just bringing all these things together, and just the amazing potential and the stuff that the conference does for so many people. So no, you guys are doing a huge amount, and the connection was there. So we definitely talked about you. Stay tuned also for the interview with Tony Stover, because that one's coming out as well too. So trust me, it had nothing to do that it was controversial or you did anything wrong. Honestly, I've been procrastinating. Ask Pastor Nate. I'm just like, dude, we're getting so behind. How am I ever going to get caught up? So the only way to get caught up is start releasing like shows 3 a week. So stay tuned, because I'm going to be starting doing premieres, 3 shows, because we've got about 15. We just did Russian vids on our last show, and he's the only person so far that speaks faster than I do.
Well, okay, so here we go. I'm going to read you a couple comments.
Sure.
One of them says, this is exactly hilarious. Right when you said that, here's the comment. It's thanks, William, for the comment. It says, come up for air, Robbie. You talk so fast. Laugh out loud.
I've been like that my whole life. It's I don't know if it's my metabolism or whatever. And people have said, you need to slow down. You need to slow down. What I have heard, however, is Americans, for some reason, find that I talk quicker than Canadians. So I don't know if Americans are used to people talking a bit slower. I remember even my father told me that one time. He said, if you're ever talking in America, understand that you've got to slow down a bit, because Americans have a hard time keeping up, not in a negative way, but he said with fast speakers. And quite honestly, speaking in different areas, I found that, that is true to the majority of Americans, that they find it's a little bit more aggressive or faster speaking than, say, other countries. So, yeah, but I can't change myself. God made me who I am, and it's who I am. So, yeah, I just got to be me. And that's it. And that's the one thing. I mean, people can hate me and love me, but I'm me.
Yeah. Take a breath. Okay. Robbie, what's your current position on Pastor? Oh, sorry about that. We're going to pass on that question.
You like throw it out halfway. That's so ridiculous. It's like, how do you feel about
Okay, we're gonna pass on that one.
I'm saddened. I'm saddened by the whole thing. I know who you're talking about, and truly, I find it incredibly sad.
All right. Needless to say, sometimes here's a great thing. Um, there's a lot of controversy going on in all circles.
Hmm.
There's a lot of division in a lot of circles. But when you read the scriptures in the regards of how we respond,
Mm.
sometimes silence and knowing when to speak and knowing when not to speak, knowing not to add fuel to fires,
Hmm.
um, is the correct answer. The scriptures teach us that even a fool who becomes silent is counted wise, right? So there's a time of, knowing when to speak, knowing not when to speak, not knowing when to, add fire, or add fuel to the fire, and put a little bit of that on there. There's a great question here. Robbie, what is the best way to deal with unbelief from people?
What's the best way to deal with unbelief with people?
Yeah.
Honestly, for me, apologetics. And if you're not aware what apologetics are, it's the defense of the faith. Basically, rather than just knowing that you believe in something, you know it's the truth. So apologetics goes a long way. It did with me, and it has with countless others. When you can actually show them evidence, and you're saying, well, wait a minute, how do I find evidence? Just type in Christian apologetics in Google, and there's a lot of great websites, and they will give all the top 100 questions that people ask, like how do I know I can trust the Bible? How do I know Jesus existed? These are elementary questions, but just simple things like that, people have a hard time with. How do I know that this Jesus character even existed? Look into it, and when you find out that there are more secular historians that say that Jesus existed than Christian historians, you find that there's just too much proof for these things to be ignored. Now, the question is, who is Jesus to you? C.S. Lewis, and he said, I use this all the time. He said there are only three things for Jesus. Either he's a lunatic, he's a liar, or he's Lord. And it really is true, because Jesus claims some crazy things. And if anybody said that in today's age, you would kind of discount it. So truly, either he's the world's biggest liar, he's crazy, or he is who he said he is. And if he is the way, the truth, and the life, honestly, it will change your life if you cling to everything he says, because everything he says will come true, and everything he says about himself is the truth.
Awesome. All right. I think that is, unless if anybody else has any questions, I'm going to allow you to give me a question. Everybody
Okay.
gets that chance.
All right, I got a question, because this is coming
Awesome.
from a
Great.
conference organizing standpoint. What would you say is the most difficult thing for you and Liz when you're organizing and putting on conferences such as Take on the World?
Ooh, well, I could start with what's easy. The easy parts are planning the event. The easy parts are gathering the speakers. The easy parts are helping with, figuring out all the logistics in between. The tough part is really dealing with the struggles of, and we're going to be flat out honest here, the struggles of the grind every single day, the constant promotion, the constant pushing of it, the struggling aspect of having faith when we're struggling financially, and when ticket sales don't come in, and we're praying, send the right people, and and at the back of my mind we're going, but if we don't get enough here, we're going to lose so much money. That is easily the toughest part, and it comes down to faith. It's a faith issue, knowing that he's in control. Just like that text tonight, it made the struggling all worth it.
Sure.
Just to hear this young man who is interested in coming after having a discussion, means all the whole, means everything.
Sure.
Just giving that opportunity to share to him once again, and let him know that he is true, and you can put your faith and all your trust back into him.
Mm-hmm.
That's what this whole thing is all about. So that is the toughest part, the struggling every single day of the unsureties of all of it. I mean, 3 years in, we thought it would be easier. 2019 is the toughest year. Last year, we thought was the worst year. Right before, and we've been vocal about this, to a degree. I don't typically speak about it. Liz speaks about it probably a little bit more than I do. Last year, before the conference, Liz was pregnant, and we lost our child. Show must go on. Our mission still had to go on. We had to push through. We had to endure. We had to push that aside. And get through the conference. And it didn't allow us any healing. We were suppressing all of those emotions just to get through Take on the World 18. And because we did it for everybody else. It wasn't about us. And so we had to suppress all that. And we thought that was the toughest thing to do. 2019, we had a lot of support. We had 600 people last year. This year we haven't had as much, support of people coming, a lot of support of people praying for us. And we feel those and we appreciate all those. But we don't have as much ticket sales as we had. And, as events are very expensive to put on, especially when we're putting on basically 3 speaking conferences in one, and a full kids conference and a full teens conference all at the same time. It's like 5 conferences in one show. And so it costs money. And, we wish it could be free. We've lost every single year financially, and that's fine. That's not what we're called to do. This is our gift back to him, that he may do his work in others. And that's all that this is all about for us. And so, it comes with this, so much, obviously we've had some division this year. We've had, people upset about this, that, or the other. And we talk about topics that are very controversial, that people, love to hate. And so, we'll get bad messages. We'll get this, we'll get that. But it is truly, at the end of the day, just the struggle, especially for 2019, of just balancing that daily faith of knowing he's in control. And it is tough. It's really tough. It's not easy. And it takes something supernatural, because we can't do it ourselves. I can't begin to have enough strength to do this. And somehow he got us through the first 2 years. And I know he'll get us through this year.
It refines you that way too, though. When you're going through those struggles, you really lean on him more, So if anything, it only increases your faith. It only increases your relationship and dependency. And so all of that stuff is good, even though it's a bad situation. Like I say, when it draws you closer to the Father and stuff, it's actually a good thing. But it's about faith. And like you said, just like you got that message tonight, there'll be a lot more surprises coming, right? Just it's all ordained. It's to happen. You were called to do it right from the start. You were called to do 2019. Just trust in him. I'm sure you and Liz are going to have some exciting updates at the beginning of Take on the World 2019. Just certain stories and certain things that have happened. I mean, being there, I appreciate you inviting me last year. I had an absolute incredible time. I can't speak highly enough for Take on the World and my experiences there, getting to know certain people, speakers, people that came out, but also just the entire atmosphere itself, and just the amount of work, knowing from a conference organizing standpoint, the amount of work and what goes on behind the scenes, what you and Liz have to go through, I don't think people even have an idea, even close, what goes on behind the scenes and how much it takes to put on these conferences. But you're right. At the end of the day, it's worth it. And that's exactly why me and my wife do what we do as well. I get attacked, you get all this stuff, you get letters and phone calls and all that. Same thing happens to me and countless other people that are on the front lines. But again, it's worth it, is it not? You know what I mean? People's lives are being changed. And if one person, if they get saved through whatever I do, it's all worth it. And if I basically hung up, everything and I was done and I knew that one person God used miraculously to save, and change his life, it would all be worth it. So, and I really honestly mean that. And I know that God's called me into different areas. Who knows? Maybe in 10 years I'll be called somewhere else. I do know that I'll be called to be on the front lines of something working for his kingdom.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, hey, Robbie, I want to give you this opportunity, if people already don't know, where they can find you,
Sure.
and you know, I want you to share a little bit about what you're going to talk about at Take on the World. So this will be your opportunity to pitch everybody to come see you at Take on the World, as well as what you have coming up. You have a fantastic conference coming up as well, so I want you to plug that and where people can find what you're doing in teaching, books, and all that kind of stuff.
Well, I've my YouTube channel is Celebrate Truth. You can also find me at celebratetruth.org. I also do a weekly show with Pastor Nate Wolf called Celebrate Truth Radio, and that's on Revolution Radio. You can find that at revolution.radio or freedomslips.com. With my work that I've done over 500 videos. I'm going in 5 years doing the information that I've done. I've put out documentaries, most notably a Scientism Exposed and Scientism Exposed 2. I'll be touching a lot around those topics just because I believe that scientism is one of the most deadliest religions around. And because it affects everyone, it's important to bring that to the forefront because so many people's lives and their worldview is shaped by scientism. And again, we're not just talking, mainly with creation, but also you'll see how science is the validators of everything from vaccinations to climate change to even 9/11. I mean, it was the scientists that came forward and said the steel beams melted and the buildings fell. So it's always the scientists that are coming in and basically validating. So Satan, knew a long time ago to use something that was respectable and truthful, such as science, because the scientific method is the truth. But again, it's been perverted, and the majority of mainstream science is not science at all. It's scientism. So I'll be talking a lot about that, weaving it into biblical cosmology, definitely addressing some new stuff that's been happening, within the community, within Flat Earth, some exciting things on the horizon as far as where things are going. Also, especially with the church, I think that definitely needs to be addressed more. The answer is not just to run away from these churches. There's a lot of great people in there, and some people are called to the church rather than leaving the church. I am one, and there's other people, and I'll be addressing the fact that if there is that calling, understand that we need to position ourselves there and get this word out because it's not about changing the mindset. It's about them at least acknowledging: are we going to stand on the literal interpretation of Genesis or not? And if they're not going to, at least get them to address it in their bylaws or their doctrinal statement. So at least people looking up that church can say, oh, these guys don't take the Bible literal when it comes to Genesis. I'm not asking churches to change their mind. Everyone's entitled to their own view. I would just like it more clarity. Let people know before they walk in. My wife and I, we've been booted out of 2 churches. If people aren't aware of our journey, I talk about my story. I might be talking a little bit more about it at Take on the World, but it was a very painful time. But we're at a 3rd church now, and we're very happy. They're very supportive. I would say that they're definitely not flat earthers, but they're geocentric. During the investigation, they've at least got that far. And it's not that they're resistant against flat Earth. Again, it comes off maybe as an excuse for some people, but you've got sermon plans and you've got a church and all that, and sometimes it takes a long time to look into a topic. So I'm just trusting that they're going to look into it. But even if they never came to flat Earth, it is not a salvational topic when it comes to my brothers and sisters in Christ. And I want to make that clear. Some people get angry, and that's fine. But I never want to elevate it to a point where we start lording it over people and thinking that our own brothers and sisters in Christ, they are lesser than, or they might not even be saved because they don't understand this truth. Because all of us came to it at one point. I was a Glober, just like Chris believed in that as well. We all were there, and I believe personally that God supernaturally has woken up certain people at the beginning of this entire huge movement. Some people it will take 10 minutes. Some people it will take 10 years. Understand that everyone's on a different journey with God. Give them that respect, but understand it's important remain passionate, and speak the truth in love. So again, I'll be addressing those things, and we will be talking about that. I'm also excited after Take on the World, I'll be putting on the third annual Flat Earth International Conference in Dallas, Texas. Very exciting this year. Got a huge amount of speakers. You can go to fe2019.com or flatearthconference.com. Both those websites will work. You can see it. I'll be adding more names here in the next few weeks. There's more announcements coming, but you will definitely see some things on the website. If you can't come to Dallas and participate, definitely check out the live stream. That will be the entire 2-day conference, including the comedy show and also the Flat Earth Video Awards. So everything is included in the live stream. And as anyone that has known my live streams in the past, I make sure they're top notch, no buffering. Everyone's had a phenomenal experience. I try to include a good experience with the live stream. So check that out. You can check that out at fe2019.com/tickets. So I think that's about it. Like I said, I talked about the radio show that Pastor Nate and I do, which is exciting. We're on episode 27 this week. We just actually premiered Rob Skiba, which we did a couple weeks ago. It was his birthday today, so I wanted to premiere our 26th episode on June 26th, which is Rob Skiba's birthday. So it all worked out pretty cool how I was able to release it on his birthday. And don't worry, there's a lot more premieres coming. We're definitely going to get caught up with the Celebrate Truth radio shows. I've got, I think, about 18 or so. There's quite a few to go. So we're hopefully by next week, I'm going to be start releasing at least 2 or 3 per week until we get caught up. So I'm glad you brought that up. It was funny that was your question. You're like, hey, is there a reason why you haven't released my do you know how many people have you're not the only one. Paul on the Plane, West Blaze. I mean, there's a lot of people that are like, are you ever releasing that radio show we did? It's kind of funny, but hey, I was saying the same thing about different conferences. I'm like, you know what's funny? I still haven't seen myself at Take on the World. I know it's not you.
Wow.
I haven't got around. I've been busy, but I just find it funny that I still haven't seen my presentation from Take on the World. But every time I talk to John Pounders, we just get talking and I just forget. So I'll see it. It's all good, but I just laugh. I know how it is when you want to see, a presentation. So anyways, I think that's it.
Yeah.
Check me out. I've got a Patreon. I have been completely demonetized. Celebrate Truth has been demonetized. Not only that, my personal channel, Robbie Davidson, it's been demonetized. I'm heavily getting censored. They've already completely deleted my documentary Impossible. At first, they limited the search. They took out the likes. They took out the comments. They took out the shareability of it. But now they've completely deleted it. I do have a backup on my personal channel, but it probably won't last long. So if you enjoy Impossible, download it to your computer because it might not last long. But anyways, if you are looking to support me, I have PayPal, I've got Patreon, I've got all the links on my channel. I would appreciate it. It all helps out, and I appreciate all your support prayerfully and just sharing the word and getting the word out about exposing the world's lies and celebrating truth.
Awesome. Well, hey guys, we're going to close out the show. I want to give one more shout out to how you guys can help us, which is our brand new fundraiser that we're doing, which is going to all support our kids program at Take on the World 19. These are, if you guys can see them, this is the blue vinyl decal. This is the Galaxy, and there's a glow in the dark, which is super cool. We have this on our vehicle, and this is a fantastic one. You can see there, you put them on water bottles, you can put them on pretty much anything. And they do say our new tagline, which is Take on the World, Light Up the Darkness. And that is our new tagline for Take on the World 19. And so we're super excited about that. So you can go right to takeontheworld19.com, go to fundraisers. These things are only $5.55 donation only. That includes shipping, and we'll just mail this right to you. And you could pop this on your vehicle, your car, laptop, whatever. Spread the word. As you can see in our logo, it means a lot of things, right? Light up the darkness. We've got the map here, so a lot of people know this as the flat Earth, flat Earth map. So there's a lot of really cool little hidden things within that. But we encourage you guys to not only come to Take on the World, but take on the world. Go out there, share your faith, and light up the darkness. One thing that I really wanted to show, there was a couple questions or a couple things in the chat. They were talking about Newsboys. Go check out the new song. It's called Only the Son, Yeshua.
You know
Is
what's
the name
interesting?
of.
I was going to bring that up on this show because my wife and I were listening to that on the way back, and it's almost like a double meaning because when he says "holy, holy," yes, you are. It's like yes, you are. But if you listen to it really carefully, he is definitely saying yes, you are, which is really cool. But also, it's like yes, you are. He goes holy, holy, yes, you are. Yes, you are. Like, but he's like, if you listen to, because I think it's Phil. Is it? Is it? I think it's Phil that's actually doing that part. It sounds like him, anyways, or is it Joel? I'm not sure. In the Newsboys United.
Yeah, Peter. Yeah, I think it's Peter.
Oh, is it Peter that
That
does that part? Okay.
I think it
Anyways,
is.
I thought it was a
Yeah,
pretty cool song because again, my wife goes, and she kind of said it. She goes, "Are they saying yes you are or yes you are?" And I said, "Well, the song's called Yes You Are," and he's like saying it in such a way his accent just kind of blends where it's almost like yes you are, like yes you are, yes you are,
yeah,
yes you are. It's pretty cool.
yeah.
I thought it was cool.
If you listen closely, you'll hear the A at the end instead of the R,
Yes, yes,
which gives it away. But it
yes,
definitely. But I mean,
yes.
look, I mean, yes, he is. Um,
It's cool
and
though.
he, yes,
It's definitely the song's called
it is.
Yeshua. It's actually called Yeshua. If you actually look at the track listing, because I actually was looking at it, I was like, that's pretty cool.
And the other song on the album, which is great, which is the song with Kevin Max from DC Talk, which is, really, it comes back to the greatest of the commandments, which is loving your neighbor as yourself. And that song's a great reminder of
Remember that
how
one?
we, yeah.
Do you remember this one?
Yes, Born Again. Yeah, you got it sealed. You got a sealed copy.
I've got a bunch sealed. Maybe I'll bring you one. Anyways, I have a bunch of those sealed, but that's 2010. But yeah, actually, you remember I said at first I was like, yeah, I don't know if I like the new Newsboys United. Actually, it's growing
Yeah,
on me. I started listening to it more on my trip when I went out to see Matt and Jess out in Grand Prairie, and we were listening to it quite a bit back to back. There's some really good songs actually on it. I'm actually pretty impressed now.
yeah,
At first, I
yeah.
was.
Things grow on you for sure.
I
But
know.
so Robbie, thank you so much for being here tonight. I know you got to run,
Mm.
and everybody in the chat room, they're getting antsy to get out of here, but they all stick around. So I want to thank you guys for always
Thanks,
sticking
everyone.
around.
Thank you.
Awesome. So yeah, you guys have a great night, and takeontheworld19.com. Check us out. If you're not subscribed to Take on the World TV, we got more shows coming up. So check us out, and you guys be blessed and have a blessed night.
Blessings, all.